35, right? If you elect someone and they're running on, this is my policy platform, this is what I stand for, this is what I want to do, and they don't carry through with it, you got to keep in mind, they are one vote out of 300 or 535. They are 1 divided by 535. They're not even 1%. Not even 1%. 0.18%. Close to 2% or 0.2%. So it's important to vote for politicians who have the policy that you prefer, but you have to temper your expectations and be realistic that they alone cannot change the entire U.S. government. What you need is for voters across the country to all vote for politicians who have that same similar policy agenda. And when you do that, when you create a Congress where it's not just one member out of 535, it's, I don't know what the number would be, maybe like 300 and something out of 535. When you get 300 and something members of Congress voted in from all across the country who have that same shared political will to do a particular policy, then you'll get it done. Which means that, I know people say politics is local, but we really have big issues at the national level. And at the national level, we need a movement that is working at a national level, that's thinking in terms of the entire, like all the districts across the country, the composition of Americans across the country, to try to get politicians in across the country that'll push that policy forward.
We need way more investment in our communities here in America.
How?
It's why I fight.
How?
It's why
How?
I, yeah.
How?
It's why I fight.
Bro,
for-
chill, calm down. Wait, let him answer.
Yeah. Barbara Jordan, a great Texan, she said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so the argument I'm making with this claim is if young people in particular aren't at the table in this election, we will continue to be on the menu in 2027. My name is James Talarico. I'm a Texas state representative, former middle school teacher, and Presbyterian seminarian, running for the U.S. Senate to take power back for working people. And I'm surrounded by 25 undecided voters here in the great state of Texas. My first claim is that cuts to healthcare and food assistance hurt all of us.
Okay. This triggers me. There's just too much shit going on the screen for me to organize. It's like, okay, I gotta put this, but there's all this other shit in the way. So the first thing I'm gonna do, this is kind of how my MO when I do stuff like this, I'm just gonna get everything off of the fucking screen, blank slate, clean slate, and then kind of go from there. So how do I get rid of this one?
Hi.
Hi, James.
Daniel?
Yes.
So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
My faith teaches me to love my neighbor as myself. In fact, all the major world religions teach something similar, that we should treat others as we want to be treated. The golden rule. I think all of these ancient wisdom traditions are hitting on the same truth, which is that we're interconnected, that what impacts any of us directly impacts all of us indirectly. We are a social species. We rise and fall together.
Oh, I'm so glad he said that. This is a talking point that I've been making for a very long time, and I really want people to pick up on it because it is true. Our species has evolved to be a social species. You have altricial species and you have precocial species. If I remember which one's which, the precocial species, they pop out of the womb of the parent, they're ready to go, right? We're a species, we're altricial species. We require a village to raise us. We require parents to raise us. We require significant investment. A baby cannot walk on its own for the first couple months. It can't eat on its own, so on and so, or it can't feed itself anyways. We require a lot of investment to become fully fledged functioning human adults. And we are evolved. I mean, the thing that made our species, it's theorized, eclipse like the Neanderthals. The Neanderthals had a larger brain volume than we did. But what we had that the Neanderthals didn't was we had a more developed ability to communicate and to socialize. And it allowed us to pass tradition along generation to generation. So in other words, pass wisdom along. Don't eat this plant, don't eat that plant, use this tool, hunt this way, right? It allowed us to communicate threats to each other. Hey, there's a tiger over here, or and to work together. We're stronger as a team. We weren't the strongest animal in the jungle, but when we group up on an animal, we were able to take it down as a group. When we worked together, we could farm crops while the other people could do this thing. And while this person here goes off and does this thing, this person over here stays back and watches the kids, so on and so forth. We are designed as a social species. We work as a social species. We are unhealthy when we don't socialize. Um, our our species is designed to work collaboratively to get shit done. So the idea that you can build a functional society where everybody is just a complete individual and, you know, no one has any responsibility to each other, no one needs to care about each other, we're not designed that way. We function best when we work together to get shit done. And so it needs to be said, it needs to be linked in the mind of people that what liberals stand for is this fundamental concept that society works better, and it shows up, by the way. Empirically, it's true. The societies that have robust social safety programs, that have infrastructure, that provide schooling for their kids, and these are the societies that do the best. Those are societies that you don't have to be quote unquote collectivist. You don't have to be where we don't have individuality, but we're individuals who are able to come together and work together. We're able to celebrate our individuality and our differences, but still respect each other, live with each other, help each other out. That is, I think, the model of success, and I think it's a really great talking point for liberals to run with.
And I think that's particularly true in healthcare and food assistance, because the Republicans in D.C. are trying to raise premiums on some Americans. That will end up raising premiums on all of us. Right now, they're cutting food assistance for hungry kids and working parents. That's going to end up raising grocery prices for all of us. And so they may think that they're just attacking some Americans, but in fact, they're attacking all Americans.
I want to focus on the religious aspect, because
Sure.
I agree.
Yeah.
Have a very Christian background.
Yeah.
But if you look at major religions, including Christianity, it is not a focus on a political system. It's a focus on individual responsibility. And when the political system takes away the individual responsibility and says, don't worry, the government's going to take care of you, you are absolutely going to catch people who need that. And it's a hand up, and it helps them. But you're also going to take away from the individual responsibility, which is needed to get out of those situations.
I think for too long this has been posed as a false dichotomy. The reality is that you want a little bit of personal responsibility, but you also want to have collective care and consideration and fairness. So what you want is something like you should be able to kind of rise and fall in the economy based on your effort and your talents and whatnot, but we're gonna let you maybe fall if you're not performing the best, if you're not putting in the effort. But there's going to be a threshold that we're not going to let you literally die. We're not going to let you go destitute, because, by the way, that causes problems for society in general anyways. You're going to have homelessness, you're going to have people trash in the streets, you're going to have people attacking people out in the streets. You don't want that, right? It's better to just make sure people don't fall below that crack, don't create, the social ills and the antisocial behavior that comes with that. But at the same time, right, if you want to do better, if you want to reach a level of success, then you should be able to kind of have some personal responsibility to rise yourself beyond that bare minimum standard. And then on top of that too, right, like, you are an individual, you take personal responsibility, but we're going to give you as a society opportunities. Whether or not you choose to take those opportunities and run with them is your personal responsibility. But as a society, we are offering public education, public health care, infrastructure, so that all the people in society can go to work, go to their jobs, conduct commerce with each other, go visit their friends. We're going to have public spaces and parks so that there are spaces for people to mingle and to socialize and to blow off steam and to be, socially and mentally healthy. But some of those extra things that you want a fancy computer, you want a fancy car, you're going to have to work for that, right? You're going to take personal responsibility for that. And if you're fucking off at your job and stuff and you get fired from your job, that's on you, right? It has to be a balance between those things. And the reality is that it has always, always, always been a balance between those things. The idea that it's one or the other, it does not exist in the history of mankind. It's not a real thing. It's a fantasy. It's silly. It doesn't work out that way.
So when you talk about food stamps and healthcare and helping, how do you balance that? Because I haven't heard a good democratic argument of, great, let's help people, but how are you? There are nasty people. there are welfare queens. There are nasty people who take advantage of the system.
So a good answer to this question is that what he's describing is something called the free rider problem. It's when you have social programs, or really just society in general, where you have people that are taking advantage of like the collective general welfare of society, but they're not contributing back to it, right? It's called the free rider. They're riding along with the rest of society for free without contributing back. That is a problem. But here's what you want to do about that. When you have social programs, you want them to be means tested, meaning if you are not actually, like, if you can work a job, then you should have to work a job rather than just relying on the taxpayer to take care of you. Now, there are times when you get laid off, you get unemployed, maybe you were fucking around, right? Maybe you were fucking around, but here's what we want to do. We don't want it to be that we have maybe young people who make a mistake in life, or they're being stupid in their younger days, and they get laid off from a job, and then they can no longer ever find a job again. We want to get them to a place where they will be responsible again. We want to give people the tools to make themselves better, to make it right, right? Make it right. You fucked up. You aren't really contributing like you should be, but we want you. It's better for society. It's better for you. We want you to have the opportunity, not to have every single door closed in your face, and you don't have anything that you could do but, commit crime in order to sustain yourself. We want to make sure that you do have the ability to become a functional member of society again, whether that's, workplace training, whatever it is. And I think what would be a really great idea, and maybe we already do this, is if you are struggling to find a job for whatever reason, and you are between jobs, right? And maybe what we should do with people like that is, if they're on unemployment for too long, maybe what happens is we shift them over to doing community service for the government. So basically, the government is getting labor, quote unquote, for free. Not really for free, because they're still going to be paying these people. Like, you're going to be getting like the unemployment welfare for it. You're not really unemployed, you're working for the government, but you might be doing things like going around cleaning up trash. And hopefully that also gives you a sense of community, gives you a sense of, I'm a part of this society. If I want to be part of the society, I want to contribute to it. When I have to go down the street and pick up trash from other people that left trash around, I start to realize, hey, you know what? These other people are creating a problem that now I have to sit there and pick up trash all day. I don't want to be like that. I realize how counterproductive that behavior is. I'm simultaneously contributing back to the society that is, helping me, giving me a hand up. And I'm also kind of realizing the value of having a functional society. So maybe they're cleaning up trash on the highways or on the streets. Maybe they are, helping out with the park service to maintain the parks, right? Plant some gardens or something. Take care of the landscaping of our public areas. Maybe helping paint, public buildings and stuff like that. Have them, mingle with other maybe young people, I guess, that might be in these programs. Engaging in pro-social behavior. I kind of got off track. I forgot where I was going with that. All right, yeah, and we'll continue on.
And take away from those who earned it, take away from those who need it. So how?
Oh, the free rider problem. So yeah, you want means testing. You want to make sure, okay, if you can work a job, then you need to either be looking for a job or you need to go out and get a job. If you're between jobs, we'll help you out, but that could only extend so long, right? You can't just live on that for the rest of your life. But let's say you run up to the limit of how much unemployment you can get. Okay, past that point, maybe now you have to work for either the government, doing community service stuff, or maybe the government has contracts, deals with businesses that will agree, hey, you know what? The government is going to maybe subsidize your business a little bit. We're going to give you like your business a certain amount per hour to employ this person. and the government's also going to basically subsidize that person's employment with that employer, and it incentivizes that employer to hire that person, right? The employer's getting something out of it because the employer's getting cheaper labor. The government's getting something out of it because the government is trying to turn this individual into a productive individual in society, and that individual is getting something out of it is because they're making a living and they're learning how to work for that living, and they're developing their resume so that, you know, they could take that later on and say, hey, look, I did this, you know, I didn't just sit on my ass for these couple months. I was part of something to try to contribute, and, you know, I want to get a new job now. So you want means testing. The thing is that our welfare system as it is, you Republicans, right-wingers try to frame it as this isn't the case, but it is the case. Our welfare systems, they actually are means tested. It seems like a lot of people don't know that. It is. It's true. It is means tested. They do have work requirements. They do require you to look for a job. They do have a time limit on terms of how much you can actually use from unemployment. You can't just sit on it for forever. And if you're able-bodied, they expect you to be looking for work. So you want it to be means tested. The other thing about the free rider problem is to do randomized audits of the system and make sure that people aren't taking advantage of it. There's this perception that there's massive amounts of waste, fraud, and abuse and welfare queens and people abusing the system. The thing that people don't know is that there are auditors that will randomly audit. That's the right way to do it, by the way. You'll go through case files, and you'll just kind of pick them out at random, and it allows you to take like a representative randomized sample of the system to see how much of that system are we finding people that are engaging in waste, fraud, and abuse in the system. And you don't want that number to be 0%. I mean, you do, but 0% is unrealistic. But there is a threshold that you want to say, okay, we want to make sure that we're keeping the waste, fraud, and abuse under this percentage threshold. Otherwise, the public's blowing a lot of money, and you guys aren't doing a proper job as employees of the government to make sure that you're rooting out, people who are abusing the system. And if you do run into that, you do your randomized audits, you're finding that there's more waste, fraud, and abuse in the system than is tolerable. Then that's a point where maybe you need new legislation to rein in that. Maybe you need to hire and fire some people within that agency. Maybe they're not doing their job. Maybe there's processes that you need to put in place because maybe the processes they have are maybe outdated or they're not sufficiently picking up waste, fraud, and abuse. So those are the things that you want to do. We don't have to pretend that having social services are automatically going to lead to a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. We have ways of making sure that people aren't abusing that system, and all we have to do is just kind of make sure that we're enforcing it and kind of keep track of it, make sure that we're meeting the metrics that we want to meet. We don't have to. Republicans and right-wingers will frame it as it's hopeless and there's nothing we can do about it, and so we just blow up the entire system. You don't need to blow up the entire system. Just be reasonable about it.
How are you going to take that into account? How are you going to make sure we cover that risk as well?
The biggest welfare queens in this country are the giant corporations that don't pay a penny in federal.
Okay. I don't really like this answer. This answer comes off as a deflection, as you're not really addressing the issue because the free rider problem is a real issue. And you can address it, and all you have to do to address it is basically say the things that I just said right now. When you deflect to the biggest abusers of welfare in our system are the billionaires and the corporations, there is a negative truth to that, but you don't have to use it as a way of deflecting away from the waste, fraud, and abuse. Like, you should have an answer to people that are asking about waste, fraud, and abuse from, regular people on welfare, on Social Security, stuff like that. You should be able to address both. You should be able to say, hey, there is an issue with people who abuse the system. We want to have means testing, and we want to have auditing of the system to make sure that we're hitting those metrics. But also, and then you can segue off so it doesn't look like you're deflecting. I also want to talk about, like, there is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse that comes from billionaires who abuse the tax code or who get bailed out, right? Those are both legitimate things to be concerned about, and I think that you can address both.
Federal taxes. The biggest welfare queens are the CEOs who get a tax deduction for flying on a private jet. It's not hungry kids. It's not working parents who work multiple jobs to provide for their families.
And that's a good point to point out, as long as you're not using it as a deflection, which is that the amount of waste, fraud, and abuse that comes from like poor and middle class Americans it's a tiny fraction of the issue. It's really not even, it's not what's worth focusing your time on. There is a lot of money that the IRS is not able to collect from people who should be paying it, right? We all have to pay our taxes. It's our responsibility to put back into the system. We come from a system that educated us, that provides infrastructure for us, that, whatever. We need government. We need to fund the government. We don't want waste, fraud, and abuse in the government, but we do need it, right? And if we have to pay our taxes as working class Americans, the rich and the CEOs and the billionaires should also have to pay their taxes. And they should probably pay a higher rate because of progressive taxation, because of marginal utility of the dollar. Right now, a lot of people don't know, the IRS, there's a lot of tax money that is owed to the IRS that isn't paid. And the only reason that it's not paid is because the IRS doesn't have enough resources to go after all of the people who are cheating the IRS. When it comes to government deficits and budgets, it's very simple, right? Money in, money out. The government has a budget of things that they need to spend on, and they also have tax revenue that they collect. So if you want to balance the budget, you do one of two things, right? If the spending is too high and the tax collection is too low, you could do one of two things. You either reduce the spending to bring it more in line with the tax, or you go after people who are not paying their taxes. And realistically, you should do a little bit of both. For too long in our country, we've been focused only on one. We've been focused on, we need to reduce the spending on everything. I think, I'm not opposed to the idea of streamlining processes, of automating processes, of reducing the size of the federal government and the state government in terms of how many employees. You want to do it gradually, though. You don't want to just lay off a shitload of people and then have a high unemployment rate. You want to gradually kind of reduce the spending there. But also, there's a lot of money that we're not collecting from people who should be paying their taxes that aren't paying their taxes. And it's not fair to working class Americans that we pay income taxes while there are rich people that are getting away with tax fraud or tax avoidance simply because the IRS does not have the tools to make sure that they're paying what they need to be paying. When we talk about billionaires paying their fair share, a lot of times we frame it in the context of we need to raise taxes on them. And I don't know, maybe not. But we don't even have to do that. The reality is that the tax code already provides for taxation on these groups, but they're simply not paying it because the IRS doesn't have enough personnel and resources to make sure that they are. So before we even get into like radically altering our tax scheme and everything, why don't we first just do the easy, common sense thing, the reasonable thing of making sure that the IRS has the resources to make sure that other people are paying taxes. All right.
I agree with you that we need individual responsibility. And I don't want to create a culture of dependency. I want a hand up and not a handout. I believe
that's good.
You don't
good rhetoric. Good way to frame it.
Teach a man to fish.
Yes.
But if you're gonna take
I've used this talking point for a very, very long time because I grew up with this idiom. You don't, you teach a man fish. You don't give a man a fish or whatever. The part that's missing from that when right-wingers and Republicans talk about it is that you actually have to teach the man to fish. You can't just expect people to just magically become more successful, more productive versions of themselves if you're not giving them the tools for that. So we want people to have independence on their own, right? But human beings are not born independent. And if you have an upbringing that didn't give you the tools for that, that sucks, right? But we to a certain degree, that's a problem with the parents. But what do you do about that? We could either just throw our hands up in the air and say, oh, well, fuck those people. Or what we could do is say, let's invest in making those people more productive. Let's give them job training. Let's give them mental health care so that if they're having mental issues, if they're having drug addiction issues, which is a mental health issue, we want to make sure that we get them to a place where they're healthy enough to start taking care of themselves. you're teaching the man to fish. You're not giving them the fish. Well, you kind of are, right? You kind of are in the sense that as you're teaching the person to fish, you need to make sure that they're able to eat. Like you need to make sure that they're fed, right? Because a dead person can't learn how to fish. So you want to keep them sustained and alive. And while they're sustained and alive, we want to teach them to fish so that they can get to a point where now they can start fishing for themselves and start feeding themselves. Okay?
Your friend out on a boat for the day to teach him how to fish, you want to make sure he had breakfast that morning. You want to make sure he's not sick, because that allows him to learn how to fish. Again, I was a public school teacher, so I saw how when kids showed up hungry,
so good.
They couldn't learn that.
So this perfect
even my brightest
rhetoric
students,
right
even
here.
my hardest working students couldn't succeed, couldn't pull themselves up by their bootstraps when they didn't have boots. That's what I'm trying to fix in this country. We don't want dependency. We want to reward hard work. And I think that should apply to those billionaires, not just working people.
I'm going to push back.
Yeah,
so
please.
I agree with a lot of what you said.
Yeah.
But the issue is, how do you prevent people from taking advantage of the system? Because, and I'm not going to say that, like, we would agree that in any kind of welfare system or any kind of aid, you have a population of people who need it, who use it to better themselves and better those around you. You also have a population of those who abuse it, and because it's there, it's harmful to them because they're uninspired to live up to their potential, and it's harmful to everyone else because they're a leech on society. And we could, I think generally we would disagree on the percentage of how much is this group and how much is that group. That's okay, but how do we prevent this?
And by the way, we don't have to disagree on the percentage. These people act like we don't have statistics on this. Again, the government already does randomized audits of these agencies. If anybody wanted to, if they weren't being fucking lazy intellectually, I mean, they talk about personal responsibility. There's a personal responsibility that you should have if you're going to say things, that you should have the facts on your side. The internet is there. You live in a time period where you have internet information at your fingertips like no other person in the history of mankind. But people will just say things without looking it up, or, you know, wonder about things without looking it up. Take some personal responsibility. Go look that information up. And if you look it up, you're going to find what the actual statistics are and how much waste, fraud, and abuse is. We don't have to guess about it. We don't have to speculate.
This group from taking advantage, not only of those of us who are hardworking and make a good amount of money, but those that really need the aid, who get a bad reputation because of these shitheads over here.
So this has actually been studied, and the
Oh.
fraud rates for SNAP, the food assistance.
Oh my God, I'm so surprised that he knows this. I have never heard any other politician or political commentator make this point. I am so fucking happy that he's making this point. I'm really impressed with this guy. I get more impressed the more I listen to him. He is very solid on his rhetoric. He's very solid on like how to navigate these conversations strategically and to make points that resonate with people.
Program and for Medicaid are shockingly low. And what happens here is the corporate media, they try to pick out some rare case and they blow it up.
The other reason why this talking point is so fucking strong is because you know that every single other person in that room has never ever bothered to look up that information, and so it kind of it highlights the fact that they are saying things that they don't even know to be true, and they're just repeating talking points. Meanwhile, he actually took the personal responsibility. He took the initiative to actually inform himself and come prepared.
They sensationalize it because they want to discredit these programs, because they don't want tax dollars going to help feed hungry kids. They want tax dollars going to billionaires that own the media so that they can get even more wealth. I wanted to go back to something you said, because we're both people of faith, both Christians, it sounds like. I completely agree with you that everyone has a personal moral responsibility to do right, to do good, to better themselves. But I'll also just say we also have a responsibility to our neighbors, to our community.
Yes.
And in fact, so much of our tradition comes out of the Jewish tradition, which is all about a covenant, a community of people, not singular individuals, but us as a community, us as a covenant. Jesus didn't tell us to love our immediate family members. Jesus didn't.
And you know what, by the way, this is something that conservatism, the issue is that conservatives have their impulses. The media kind of manipulates those impulses, but conservatism does have within it this innate intuitive understanding of like the family unit and your local community and churches working as, you know, social support structures, and the idea of networking and of being a positive member of your society, right? So there's a way to communicate this idea that would resonate with conservative voters of, we want individuals, we want individual responsibility, we want to champion the individual merits of different people, but we also do need to recognize that like a healthy society is a society where individuals are contributing to a healthy community. They're contributing to their community, and the community, a healthy community, a healthy culture is what fosters strong individuals. Right? Again, it's a false dichotomy. It doesn't have to be one or the other. These things build off of each other. A strong community and a strong culture is built off of strong, healthy individuals, and strong, healthy individuals are born out of strong, healthy communities and cultures.
And tell us to love our close friends. Those probably would have been easier commandments to follow. He told us to love our neighbors. And then he specifically went further and defined neighbor as someone who's very different.
Really smart of him too to bring religion into it, because religion is something that a lot of Americans, especially conservatives, like religion is their one most important axiom. So to force them to have to contend with, these are actually values from your religion. It's more central, has more authority than any Fox News, than any social media post, than anything else. Like, your religion teaches that we're supposed to kind of engage this way.
From us. And that is an inherently a public thing. Loving your neighbors is something you do out in public. It's why my faith motivates me to do public service, first as a public school teacher, now as a public official. And so I just want to hold both of those two things together, because there's absolutely a role for individual responsibility and individual choices, but there's also responsibility to others and to the community. Both those things can be true at the same time.
All right, pause. You've been voted out by the majority. Please.
That's so good. He did such a good job there.
Nice to meet you. Hey, Stefan. So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. On its face, what you're saying, cuts to healthcare, cuts to food assistance for Solvis, sounds good. But if you look at it at the inverse, increases to healthcare and increases to food assistance doesn't help all of us. And the reason why is we have a bloated healthcare system where a lot of the money that goes into it gets accrued to the intermediaries, the companies delivering these services, the consultant class.
There is some truth to this. In the United States, one of the big reasons why our healthcare costs are more than comparable countries with universal healthcare systems is because it's like 1/3 of the total. 1/3 is like the actual care, the actual drugs. 1/3 is the staff, the employees, the doctors and nurses. The other third is to administrative overhead. Because our healthcare system has so many like different ways that things are funded, both public and private, both state, federal, local, different rebates from different drug manufacturers. The funding for healthcare it requires like a whole administrative staff. If you ever go to the emergency department, for example, I used to work in the emergency department. There is an office, at least in my emergency department, there was an office where every single day, every single night, 24/7, 365, there was an office within the emergency department that had, I think it was like 3 or 4 employees at any given time. And their job was to just go, like, with each patient that would come in, figuring out the funding mechanisms for their care. What is their insurance? What is their in-network, out-of-network? What programs does the hospital have? What programs do the drug companies have? What programs do you qualify for? Things of that nature, right? So if we could reduce that overhead, we could reduce the healthcare costs. There is a trade-off, right? The trade-off is that if you were to eliminate that, you're eliminating, millions of jobs within the economy. And so it's another thing where I like that trade-off. And if you like that trade-off too, it's something that we need to gradually phase in. We can't just lay off millions of workers like that. We're going to have a higher unemployment rate. Hold on, this thing thinks I'm away from the keyboard. You are no longer away from the keyboard. Okay. Nemesis invited you to join Jedi Order. I'm already in a guild though, am I not? Oh, my guild isn't inactive because I'm not a subscriber anymore. Okay, anyways. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so it's the administrative cost. And part of that administrative cost is because like we don't have a universal healthcare system. Think about it. When you have a universal healthcare, there's a single payer, right? I think most universal healthcare systems, they have like bespoke private insurance that you could buy if you want like a higher standard of care, but like most people have the universal healthcare system, but it's much more simplified in that manner, right? You're not dealing with local, state, federal, in-network, out-of-network, private insurance, public insurance, different rebate programs, stuff like that. You have the government is the single payer for it. They're able to negotiate drug prices for that reason. That's why drug prices are cheaper in most of these other countries, because the government is the big primary buyer, and so they're able to negotiate the cost. And the system is a lot more streamlined because we're not dealing with all these different interlocking different methods of funding. It's just one funder, right? Yeah, so anyways.
A lot of fraud happens. I mean, we have
Again, like, and I would ask this person, I would ask anyone that brings these stuff up, how much fraud? Quantify that. Give me, always make people quantify what they're talking about or ground it out in examples, right? People will say things, there's a lot of fraud. How do you know that? Where are you getting that from? What statistics are you referring to? Because maybe there isn't a lot of fraud. Maybe there is. I don't know. But it's worth asking, like, is that something you actually know to be true, or is that just like a political talking point you've been told to regurgitate? And also, the solution to, oh, we have issues with the bloat of our healthcare system, I don't think the solution to that is, oh, well, therefore we're going to throw our hands up in the air and we're not going to have healthcare for our population. Why don't we instead do something to give healthcare to our entire population so they're more productive, more healthy, and address whatever, issues we have with corruption or fraud and abuse in the system? It doesn't have to be one or the other.
a current member of the Senate, not in Texas, but in the U.S., who defrauded millions of people out of Medicare benefits and the like. So one of the things that I worry about is when we're talking about restoring the money that's been cut, is how is it going to be used effectively? So
here's another good way to make this point, to kind of point out kind of why this is like a dishonest talking point, is if a conservative ever brings this up, ask them, do you think that there's no waste, fraud, and abuse in the military? The answer to that is probably going to be, well, yeah, there is waste, fraud, and abuse in the military. Okay, so do you think that we shouldn't have a military just because there's waste, fraud, and abuse in the military? Well, no. I mean, we should have a military. It doesn't mean we throw our hands up in the air, we blow up the entire system. It just means that we want to make sure that we wrangle in that waste, fraud, and abuse. So if they can understand that about the military, then the same logic should apply to something like healthcare. And you should force them to have to kind of acknowledge that analogy, you know?
I'm not against having more healthcare to more people. What I'm against is that money being used inappropriately. And, you talk about the wealthy, the top versus bottom. This is a system that actually makes more people poor and the fewer that are really rich, richer, because it gives more opportunities for money to be sucked out of the system and accrued into fewer hands. So we're not necessarily serving more people. So that's why I hesitate.
This is, in philosophy, this would be called a non sequitur. Just because there are people who are making money off of the system, rich people that are taking advantage of it, does not mean that it's not serving, it's not beneficial to the people on the lower end, right? It's possible that you're providing a service, like let's say we had a universal healthcare system. All the people in that society have healthcare, they have mental health care, they're covered, they're healthy, they're able to get checked for any issues that they have. That's positive, that's a good thing for the average person. Is it possible in that system that you still have people at the top who are taking advantage of that system? Yes, right? But just because you have people at the top who are taking advantage of it does not mean that it's still not beneficial to the people at the bottom. You don't want that person at the top to be corrupt and to be taking advantage of the system, yes, but that doesn't mean, again, it's like a false dichotomy. You don't need to have one or the other. It means that you need to rein in whatever's that loophole that that person's taking advantage of, while still maintaining the benefit to the larger society population as a whole. And this idea that, more healthcare to the people is not going to be beneficial to the population, all we have to do is look at other societies. The societies that have universal healthcare systems, they are healthier. They are mentally healthier. They are physically healthier. They have better diets and nutrition. They have better preventative care. Their healthcare costs are lower. They don't, they don't go into crazy medical debt. And it's my understanding that medical debt is one of the leading causes of debt for American citizens. So the idea that having like a universal healthcare system is not going to be beneficial to the average person is just not true. And so to use this talking point that, oh, there's some people who are taking advantage of it, just like with the welfare, free rider problem, the welfare queens, it's designed to make an excuse for why we can't do something that's beneficial to poor or average people. And it's a distraction from it. It's the same thing as, like, let's say, I don't know if this is going to be a good analogy. I have a family. Let's say I have one person in my family who's a shithead. Does that mean that the concept of having a family, of investing in a family, of nurturing those relationships is bad just because one person within that structure, within that system is bad? No, it just means that one element of it needs to be worked on.
To agree that necessarily cutting healthcare, cutting food assistance is necessarily hurting all of us. Maybe it's probably hurting the rich more than it is hurting most of us.
Well, you are preaching to the choir. I think we've got to transform this healthcare system from the bottom up. Most other countries around the world have figured out how to provide quality healthcare at lower costs for more people. We're the only rich country that hasn't figured this out because we have giant health insurance companies leeching the life out of our healthcare system. And so I absolutely agree with you. If we're cutting some of those profit margins for these giant healthcare companies, I'm all for it. But that's not what's being proposed in Washington right now. That big ugly bill is going to kick millions of Texans off their healthcare. Right now, this government shutdown is all about the Republicans trying to raise premiums on working people. Those folks who can no longer afford to pay those higher premiums, they're going to drop their health insurance. Those folks are no longer going to get their screenings. They're no longer going to get their checkups. They're going to wait. Things are going to get worse. They're going to get sicker. And then where will they go? To the emergency room. And who pays for that? Me and you. It's going to...
Now, the issue is that a lot of these voters are going to say, well, we shouldn't pay, the emergency room shouldn't, that's another issue. Why are we paying the emergency bills for other people? To which case you always ask the question, okay, well, what is the alternative? Force them to bite this bullet, because a lot of times they throw it out there without accepting the implication of what they're saying. Force them to bite the bullet. Or are you saying that you want the emergency room to not take care of people who are, in an emergency medical situation? You want them to die in the street? Most of the time people will say, oh, well, no. And then you push them on that. Well, okay, then why did you bring that up for? What's the point of you making that talking point, right? Or alternatively, they do bite that bullet and they say, well, yeah, I don't think we should let them die in the street. Okay. And by the way, that's fine, because the reality is that a person who says that, most people don't find that convincing. Most people find that to be sociopathic. Most people don't want that. So if you allow them to bite that bullet, you have kind of made them look silly in the eyes of most people. So it's a good point to kind of bring up, like, okay, yeah, if you're against the emergency room taking care of patients who don't have insurance, what do you want to do about that?
Raise our property taxes here in Texas. For indigent care at the county level, we all pay for that. And it is so much more expensive on the back end than it is on the front end. We end up saving money if we invest in preventative care on the front end. And so that's my point with this claim, is that we're all interconnected. What hurts some of us ends up hurting all of us. And when we're all better off, we're all better off. Same with the food assistance cuts. Cutting SNAP benefits for hungry kids and working parents, it disrupts the entire supply chain in our economy, from ranchers and farmers here in Texas to distributors and truck drivers to grocery stores like H-E-B. And when supply goes down, prices go up. So because the Republicans in D.C. are cutting food assistance for poor folks, it's now going to make grocery store prices even more expensive for everybody. So if we make the decision to invest in our neighbors, to love our neighbors through good public policy, even when we're open to reform and fixing these broken systems, it's actually going to make us all healthier. It's going to make us all safer. It's going to make us all richer.
I mean, that sounds really good. The only thing that I'm sort of hearing coming from your answer is it's an acceptable cost or benefit to, give more money to the intermediaries if it's giving more people healthcare. And that's where I continue to sort of hesitate.
Let me give you a solution that.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't really think this guy's arguing in good faith. I think that he's posing excuses that he thinks are convincing to the audience. But I would push him on this. Okay, well, you don't want the intermediaries to make money, so then what do you want? You want us to not have healthcare then? Is that what you're saying? And force him to own that. And if he owns that, it's the same thing with the ER thing. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Okay, well, I disagree. I think most people disagree, but good luck with that. If he doesn't own it, then push him on that. Okay, well then why do you keep repeating it? Why do you keep bringing it up? It seems like you are using it as an excuse to argue against healthcare for citizens while not actually accepting responsibility for holding that position. Because a lot of times that is what people will do, is they'll do things like I'm just asking questions, or they'll concern troll, oh, well, that sounds good, but I'm concerned about this. Okay, well, it seems like what you're really doing is you're trying to lead people to a conclusion without you yourself owning that, the implications of what you're saying. And I don't like that. It pisses me the fuck off. It annoys the shit out of me. People that I'm gonna go unhinged for a minute here. People that do it unironically in debate when I'm talking to them annoy the fuck out of me. It's when I go from being a good faith debater to like, I'm going to like shit down your throat now. I'm gonna fucking tear you apart now. Is when they do that. Number one, it's bad faith. It's dishonest. It's manipulative. But also, it's like, it's insulting to all of our intelligence. It's like, you actually think I'm stupid enough to not realize what you're doing, and you think that you're going to get away with it? No, fuck you. I'm going to shit down your fucking throat now, motherfucker. Congratulations.
That could address this. I'm for a public option. I'm for allowing anyone in the state of Texas, anyone in America, to sign up for Medicare, to be able to access high-quality, low-cost healthcare. I think when we do that, you're going to see folks who are in terrible healthcare plans flee and join this public option. It creates competition in the market. It creates choice. It creates opportunities for people to decide what's best for themselves and their families. So I am not satisfied with this healthcare system. Please do not misunderstand me. We need transformational change when it comes to healthcare in this country, because I believe healthcare is a human right, and it shouldn't depend on how much money you make or how much money your parents make. We all are entitled to high quality, low cost, affordable healthcare.
Why, instead of reform, not just completely dismantle and start from scratch? Because to me, cutting or reforming has not worked in the last 20, 30, 40 years. There's been incremental changes around the corners, and none of that has worked. To me, the solution is a complete reworking of the entire system. So any sort of reform, to me, does not do the job, does not go far enough.
I'm completely for holistic reform and reworking of the system. As a legislator over 4 terms in the state capitol, I've realized how difficult it is to make change. I've got big dreams for this state and for this country, but I'm also very realistic on what I can promise as a candidate for office. And I don't want to sit here and tell you that I can transform this system overnight. I can't. What I can do is adopt some actual reforms that'll help provide more healthcare to more people. And you've said that we haven't seen the system get better. I want to push back on that, because when the Affordable Care Act was...
This is another thing to bring up. Some people do have this kind of cynical mentality that things never get better, things have never gotten better. It's like a recency bias. It's like a negativity bias. It's like you're born in an era where, yes, things aren't perfect. Yes, there's progress to be made. There's things to be worked on. But there's some people that kind of have this mentality that things have never gotten better, things never will get better. And it's like, number one, that mentality is like self-defeating. Things will never get better if you have that mentality. Number two, you really only think that because you were not born back when we didn't have vaccines, back when we didn't have public health, back when we didn't have public education, back when women didn't have the right to vote, back when we had segregation, back when slavery was legal, right? That is not to say, by the way, because some people will use that as an excuse to like never want to change anything. But it is to say that things have gotten better over time, incrementally, and that is the model for success that we want to do, which is we don't want to just complain. We don't want to just throw our hands up in the air. We want to say, hey, things have gotten better over time, and we want to keep that momentum going. We want to build upon that.
Past, we suddenly saw health insurance companies no longer able to deny Americans coverage for pre-existing conditions. We saw that young people could stay on their parents' plan until they're 26. We have seen progress. It's too slow. It's unacceptably slow. The only way that's going to change is if you and the people around this circle take more ownership of this democratic process, not just voting, but running for office yourselves, supporting candidates, organizing, protest. That's how we can speed up the pace of change, which I desperately hope we can do because people are counting on it.
All right, pause. You've been voted out by the majority.
Great job.
Return to your seat.
Yeah.
Also, really good that James Talarico, he comes off as he will always look better than his opponent because, and this isn't my style, by the way. This isn't my realm. I understand what he's doing. I understand why he has to do it. He is always respectful to his opposition. He comes off as somebody who his opposition can respect and can appreciate. And there are going to be members, of course, of his opposition who will never agree with him. But there are going to be people who are like, you know what, this guy is very reasonable. He's very respectful. He doesn't look down on me. He's very respectful. He's calm when he delivers his messages. It is a particular style, but it is an effective style.
Hi, Brandon. So nice to meet you. Yeah.
Pleasure. So, I agree with your sentiment.
Yeah.
However, what I've seen over the last 2 weeks or so, I live in East Texas.
Yeah.
So when the SNAP benefits were being cut, I made a post on a Facebook group out in our area, and it received more love and support than I've seen through communities. So I think that I agree that the benefits being cut is a very, very bad thing. We should definitely be doing everything we can to help the people who are in need, but it's also shown me that the indomitable spirit of the American will come together and rescue the people that really need the help, at that time. So
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And in fact, I'm running for U.S. Senate. We have 8,000 people who have signed up to volunteer for the campaign, which is great. As a politician, you always want to have people volunteering. But when these food assistance programs were cut, we decided to channel all of that volunteer energy away from our campaign and into food banks all over the state of Texas. We had a bunch of Team Talarico volunteers at the San Antonio and Houston Food Bank helping to make sure that we were taking care of our neighbors.
Sure.
I'm trying to go a little further with this claim and say not only is it the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do.
Sure.
Yes,
Because when we
that's so
cut
good.
these programs that provide
Yes, because a popular talking point on the right is that liberals want to do things which, it sounds good, it's morally good and everything, but it's just not pragmatic. You need to make the point that not only is it morally good, but it's also pragmatic. And the reality is like I don't think people want to believe this, but it is true. If you look empirically at society, as society has become more egalitarian, as we've put into place more rights, more social programs, society has become more productive, more healthy. The economies have grown. We've become more technologically advanced. There's this negativity bias that people have that if you have a mentality that's too positive, too good, then it has to be one or the other. You're either, realistic but a little bit negative, or you're very idealistic and positive but not pragmatic. The reality is that we have been very successful as a society as we've become more, egalitarian, as we had more rights, as we had more social programs. It doesn't mean that you go fully 100% in that direction, but the impulse that, being smart, being realistic, being mature, being an adult, being the big man in the room means that you have to tell people no all the time. That's also not true. That is a bias. It's called a negativity bias. Why the hell is that locked there? Utility bar 2. Is utility bar 1?
A lifeline to our neighbors who are struggling. It ends up allowing them to be more productive.
Whoa.
It allows them to give their gift. I believe every person is made in the image of God.
Sure.
Every person has something unique to give this world. And when we make sure that everyone has enough to eat, we make sure everybody is healthy, people are able to give that gift.
Sure.
And that ends up benefiting all of us. I really do believe that the next great business idea is trapped in the mind of a kid in poverty on the west side of San Antonio.
I think the scary part for me is that what we're witnessing right now is that these programs that are designed to help people and designed to help further our communities can be used as weapons, as threats that if this bill doesn't get passed, we're going to cut, we're going to cut healthcare, we're going to cut, funding for food for children. I mean, my problem is that there's so much partisanship in politics now, where it feels like the politicians that we have in office right now don't necessarily care what the issue is. They just care about the outcome, which is my party wins, the other team loses. So what would be your plan to work with the other side?
I've had to work across the aisle to get stuff done, and I have. So I want to tell you a story. When I was running for this seat in the state house, I was 28 years old, healthy guy, and I decided to walk the entire length of my district from Round Rock, Texas to Taylor, Texas, 25 miles. It was a long walk. It was all in the Texas heat.
Yep.
Halfway through the walk, I started to feel fatigued and nauseous.
It's kind of weird thing to say, but conservatives love storytelling. They love anecdotes. If you pay attention to their media, a lot of their media is not like, here's like statistically widespread structurally what's happening. It's here's a story of one person who was killed here. Here's a story of a cat litter box at a school. Here's a personal emotional story. They'll say that they don't like that everybody else is emotional, but the reality is they do. Their media very clearly shows that they respond very well to personal anecdotes. And so him giving a personal story helps connect what he's intellectually trying to get across to the audience being conservatives who he wants to connect with, and they respond to these kind of personal stories. The other thing too is it makes him more personable. There's a risk that you run if you take his kind of rhetorical like cadence and stuff, where it's very polished, very statesman-like, very kind of politician-y. You can kind of come off as ingenuine or stale or like a bit of a robot. But by also intermixing that with the ability to kind of connect with people on an emotional level, to share personal stories about yourself that humanizes you, it's able to balance that out.
I actually threw up a couple times in the last half of the walk. Somehow I finished it. My family got concerned. They took me to the ER. The nurses tested my blood sugar. I don't think I'd ever had my blood sugar tested before. They told me that a normal blood sugar is 100 or lower. Mine was 900. I was in a state of diabetic
over
ketoacidosis.
9,000.
They told me that I had type 1 diabetes. I didn't even know what type 1 diabetes was, to be honest with you. I went to Walgreens to pick up my first 30-day supply of insulin, this new medicine that I now needed to live, and it cost me $684
It's crazy.
for a 30-day supply. And
James,
learned,
if you want to buy that same bottle of insulin for your dog, it's $25.
well, and so here in Texas, after I got elected, I worked with people with diabetes all over the state. I found out that people were rationing, skipping their doses. Some of them were dying because they couldn't afford it.
Right.
And I was able to work across the aisle with my Republican colleagues to pass the first ever cap on insulin copays in Texas history.
Sure.
So from $684, even with insurance, we capped it at $25.
Also, that response the other guy's giving, sure, he's waiting for his opportunity to start spinning his narrative. This is such an important thing for liberals to take note of. James Talarico, and not even in a hostile, not even in a very rude or domineering way, James Talarico is keeping the conversation in his wheelhouse. He is controlling the flow of the conversation. He is the one making a positive message, a positive story. What I mean by that, not positive like it lovey-dovey and it's nice and it's, what I mean by is affirmative. You are the one making the case. You're not just defending, you're not just responding, you are making a case. You are telling a story. And the other person is on the back foot, either having to respond or having to try to figure out where they can get a word in. Liberals need to do that way, way more. The conservatives have been absolutely, unequivocally, massively fucking dominant at controlling the media focus and the narrative and the flow of the conversation and the framing. You have to get over this, especially in politics, you have to get over this impulse that you have, because it's a natural good impulse in regular life, that you want to make space for other people to talk, that you don't want to eat up all the oxygen in the room. In politics, it is this isn't regular socializing. This is a game of winning and losing, and you want to be the one who is on the affirmative, offense most of the time. You want to be the one with the ball, running the ball to the field goal, not the one always on the defense.
Yeah. So now, through public policy, we're going to make sure that people with diabetes can live a long and healthy life. This system is broken.
Yep.
This healthcare system
Absolutely.
is broken. Progress is way too slow, but when we come together, when we actually believe progress is possible, we can make people's lives better, and that's the whole purpose of politics.
Sure.
All right, pause. You've been voted out by the majority.
Great job,
Please
Brandon.
return
Thank
to
you.
your seat.
Thank you.
Dude.
Hi, Maria.
Hi. Yes,
So nice to meet you.
Okay, so I want to go back to kind of what you guys were saying.
Yeah.
You were saying that through your faith, charity and giving is part of what makes us all run. And I think that the issue here is that the charity and the love is important, but it's not something that is in government. I think it's something that is moral and civic education, and that's very much needed in order for us to live in a just and free society. But government isn't where you put the charity, because the thing is, I was a former social worker.
Here's a good response to this, because it is a very conservative mindset that we shouldn't use the government to do charity. We just rely on our churches, rely on our communities to do the charity. And it makes sense from a conservative perspective. A lot of them go to church, and so church does foster a good sense of community. I don't like religion, I don't like church, but it is true that church provides a sense of community, and there's a support network there. That is true. And so conservatives will often see, like, we don't need government because we have a community ourselves that we take care of each other. The problem with that is that not everybody has a family. Not everybody has a good community that they can go to. And historically, there's a reason why government had to step in, right? And this is what you want to bring up. You always want to bring up, okay, you're saying that charity should only come from the community. It shouldn't come from the government. Let me ask you a question. You could do this in a very polite, respectful way, like James Talarico is doing. Let me ask you a question. If community charity is enough, right? Sure, in some places, for some people, it works. But if it was enough for our entire society to operate off of that, to just rely on that being the way that we take care of people who are in dire straits, why do you think that the government instituted these social programs in the first place, right? Now, their response is probably going to be something along the lines of some sort of conspiracy. Oh, because government wants to take over everything, or because politicians, they wanted to put these things in place so that they can siphon money out of the public. Your response to this is going to be, no, that's not actually why we put these things into place. We put a lot of these programs into place during the Great Recession, for example, because community churches and community groups, even though they do a good job, even though it's great that they do these things, the reality is that there was a time when they just did not have the capacity. They just did not have the ability to actually take care of all the people that were homeless or had mental issues or X, Y, or Z thing. And so we don't want to rely on the off chance. We don't want to leave it up to chance that the community is always going to step in. You might have a great community. Your community might really take care of your people, but that's not always going to be the case for everyone everywhere. We don't want to rely on that. We want to make sure, we want to ensure that there is going to be a safety blanket for people to fall back on so they don't fall through the cracks. And if your church, if your community is able to, take care of people without the government, that's awesome. That's awesome. We just want to make sure that there are no gaps in that. That's a great way to kind of frame it.
Worker before I became a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah, good.
And I worked with a lot of people, adults and kids. And one of the things that I've seen is like when people are on food assistance for too long, and I think something like 30% of SNAP beneficiaries stay on it long term, it kind of perpetuates and keeps them in poverty rather than helping them out of it. And
so this is a talking point that the right repeats very often, and at this point it's kind of like an axiom. They believe it's true. I don't know if there's any data or any research that they have to show that this actually is the case. Maybe it is, but it's also possible that those communities are in generations of generational poverty simply because that is the socioeconomics throughout all of history, throughout all of human civilization, that if you are born into poverty, you're very likely to wind up also being in poverty when you become an adult. Another good counter argument to this is to point to the social democratic countries like, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, or whatever, some of the European countries. Those countries, there used to be a time period where the United States had the highest social mobility in the world, socioeconomic mobility, meaning you can start off as a poor kid, and then through hard work and your own, grit and whatever, you're able to rise up to a higher level, to the next rung in society, become a professional, and then maybe beyond that become like a more wealthy person, right, in the next generation. What we want ideally is for the generations to build upon each other. But what we've seen in the United States is, over time, the social mobility rate has actually declined. Well, it's increased for Europe. Well, what is the difference between our two countries? Europe has invested in universal health care, in their infrastructure, in having good public spaces for people to mingle with, right? It has invested in people, free public college education, things of that nature. So the idea that you're going to strip all those things away and then people are going to be able to, because now they're forced to, they're going to be able to kind of pull themselves up and do better than their parents' generation. I think historically that doesn't even bear out, right? If you go back in history before we had any of these social programs, and if you look at the statistics, chances are that if you were born into poverty, you died into poverty. That social mobility became a big thing in the United States when? It became a big thing when we had like FDR, and we had all these programs that were put into place. Public education. I mean, we know that there's a correlation between public education and the ability to do better than your parents. Public education, unionization, and then we can see in these other countries, universal health care, infrastructure, things of that nature. So we don't have to speculate about this. We don't have to make a narrative about it. We don't have to spin a story. We could just look at the historical evidence to see what is the case.
And if we're missing a big middle class, we're talking about like the poor kids that obviously should have food, but there's a big class outside of that is struggling and doesn't have the food assistance. So I don't think it's a government.
I hear you. So I was just talking about a scripture that guides me, and that's Matthew 25, about how we're judged and how we're saved. I forgot to add that judgment is not just on individuals, it's also on the nations. So it is both us as people, it's also us as...
This is really good too, because it forces these people who, portray themselves as good Christians, that they pretend that Christianity is the thing that guides their morality. It forces them to have to contend with, okay, your politics is kind of running up in contradiction to what your stated principles of your religion is. So you're going to have to bite the bullet. You're either going to have to bite the bullet on, I place my politics and my personal interests above my religion, or you have to bite the bullet on, actually you're right, maybe I need to reconsider things because my religion does say that we're supposed to, kind of do these things to take care of each other. But the point is, you cannot call yourself a Christian. You cannot lean on your Christianity to have a moral high ground if you're going to simultaneously advocate for things that go against what your religion is telling you. Something is off there, and that's a good thing to point out.
as communities, and whether or not our community.
And by the way, he's framing in a way, it's very much his rhetorical style. He's not framing in a way that's directly attacking them. It's very polite. It makes him look good. It doesn't make him look hostile, but it's still putting that implication out there to the audience that's watching, and the audience can kind of they can realize basically the implication of what he's saying without him having to do it aggressively and without him having to be like accusatory.
Our nations, our governments are caring for the poor and the hungry and the widow and the orphan. So if you look through the entire Bible, particularly the Hebrew scriptures, there is so much criticism of kingdoms and empires and governments for not doing right by their people. So many of the Hebrew prophets called out the powerful, the people who are in charge. The difference is today we live in a democracy. We don't live in an empire. And so we are making these decisions together. And when we decide as a country through the consent of the governed that we want to pitch in to make sure.
Thank you. Let's bring back that liberal rhetoric. I mean, true liberal rhetoric. Consent of the governed. Such a fundamental, important concept around what it means to have a just government, what it means to have a government of and by the people, what it means to, structure a government in a society properly. Is that it is a contract. It is a social contract. It is a mutual agreement to live with each other and to, build a society together. It's not just everybody for themselves, dog eat dog.
Make sure that the most vulnerable people have what they need to succeed and fulfill their potential. I think it's a beautiful thing. I think it's a very Christian thing to do. There are so many politicians who talk about making this a Christian nation until it comes to feeding the hungry.
Oh my God,
until
so
it comes
good.
to caring for the sick.
I'm just having like a rhetorical orgasm listening to this guy. He's so good. I'm even more impressed. I've seen clips of him and I've had a positive vibe from him the entire time. He's really good at this. He's so fucking good. This is an absolute masterclass in political rhetoric for liberals, especially this particular style. The style that is, you don't have to use a style. There's different styles that work. This one is a particular style of very like all-star American, very like that kind of old school 1950s era kind of Americana look and affectation, respectful, personable, relatable, friendly, but also making a very solid case for what he's talking about and laying the groundwork for like the underlying axioms that we build our ideology up from. Absolute masterclass. Pay attention to this debate. This is the debate to pay attention to.
Until it comes to serving the poor. You talked about people being long-term on food assistance. I would say the reason for that is because we haven't raised the minimum wage in this country.
So good. So true. Absolutely true. The right has done a really good job with their media as framing it as everything else. It's your taxation. It's waste, fraud, and abuse, right? No, actually, it's the wages. The wages have not kept up with inflation. The rising cost of living and everything. If the wages were keeping up with the rate of inflation, we wouldn't be having this problem. If the wages kept up with inflation, people would still be angry about paying their tax, sure, because people want everything for free. But we wouldn't have the issue that we do. People feel squeezed to pay any amount of taxes because they don't feel like they're making enough to make a living. And all these excuses that we make are ways to distract the people away from demanding higher wages. Now, when it comes to wage policy, let's be smart about this. Let's be rhetorically effective about this. You don't need to have a $20 wage rate in every fucking state, every locality. It is right when people point out, and you cannot just deflect away from this. You cannot just hand wave it away. You will sound like you're immature, naive, impractical to your average voter. It is true that when you raise the wages, the cost of goods and services will rise in addition to the wages increasing. But past a certain point, I think you have to go. You'd have to go all the way up to 200% wage increase for the wage or for the price of the goods and services to also increase at the same rate. We know this empirically to be true, and you know it if you look at the equation for what it costs for a good or service. The cost for a good or service, the input cost, wages, labor is only one of the input costs. So when wages rise, the increase in the cost of goods and services do not rise at the same rate. They're not linearly proportional, as you would say in mathematics. The wage growth can increase, and the increase in the goods and services will increase at a lower rate. As long as that wage growth is either higher or on par with that inflation rate, you're solid. And so you need to make that point to people that yes, we cannot raise the wages so much that it causes the inflation to just outpace it, but you can raise the wage rate in certain increments over time, gradually, and it will outpace the rate of inflation. We know that from history. Tell them that, make that point. We know that to be true from empirical data from history. And what we don't want to do is be like, oh, we need to have a $20 minimum wage. Okay, 10 years later, we're going to have the same fight again. What we want, we should be talking about, what should be the national conversation. Steal that fucking conversation away from the way that Republicans want to talk about things. Steal it away from all the distractions. This is our conversation. We will have it the way we want to have it. Be bold enough to assert that. The conversation that we need to have in the public is that the wage needs to be tied to local costs of living and inflation. It's a function, meaning it will update itself. Maybe we peg that every year. Maybe we do it, every 6 months. But either way, we want it to be updating constantly. We don't want to have a policy battle every 5 years. We want to set it in place. It's an equation. It needs to cover the cost of living, plus or minus a few percentage points, and it needs to match the rate of inflation. Well, the rate of inflation will affect the cost of living, but that's the point. And it'll be localized. So the minimum wage in California might be $25. Maybe in Wyoming it's, I don't know, $9. Whatever it is for that locality is what it needs to be. And there was a time when maybe that was impractical to do, but we have the data to do that now. In fact, if you're planning on moving somewhere, there are websites that give you information on what is the local cost of living in that area, what is the average cost of rent, what is the average cost of your energy bill, depending on the square footage of the place that you're going to live at, what is the average cost of a basket of groceries. We have the data for that. We can make this calculation, and in fact, we can make this calculation automated. We could pull that data from those databases that already exist, feed them into an algorithm, and that algorithm does it. You don't need a massive staff to do this.
In 15 years, here in Texas, it's still a little over $7 an hour. We allow these giant multinational corporations making record profits to pay people poverty-level wages. That is what's keeping people in a cycle of dependency. That's what's keeping people in poverty, not because we want to provide some basic health care and basic food assistance.
Also, another really good way this is framed is, I'm just looking at some real fast. Another really good way that I've heard this countered is it comes from Bernie Sanders. I believe I heard it first from Bernie Sanders, but it's that when we don't pay people a livable wage, what we're actually doing is we're now forcing the taxpayer to subsidize that company, because the taxpayer will now have to pay that person. They'll either have to pay them SNAP benefits to cover the cost of groceries that they can't afford on their wage. We're either going to have to subsidize their housing. We're going to have to, help them pay for their medical bills. We want employers to pay a living wage for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is because we want them to pay for their employees. We don't want the taxpayer to have to foot the bill for the employer. Also, when your average worker is paid well, they spend more money in the economy, which grows the economy, which goes back into those very businesses. It's growing the entire economy from the center out.
I think it's both. On paper it's $7, but if you go to McDonald's, you're making $12, which is not good.
Right,
it's
sure.
Still not
in the
great,
richest country in the
but
world.
It's more than $7. But I think when you're trying to put charity into policy, you're taking away communities. You're taking away the power.
No, and you can't let them get away with this. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Again, we want to build strong communities. We want to pay attention to that, actually. It's an issue that we're currently facing with social media, is that young people don't really have these common spaces. Everywhere they go, it costs money to be there. We want to have good, positive communities. We want to foster positive communities. but we don't want to let people fall through the cracks because there's gaps in, you know, people's basic charity and their voluntary desire to help people. We don't want to do that.
Power in communities
We don't want to
rather
do that.
than, and a lot of people, if they don't have the education and the statistics, they kind of just go, like you said, they vote based on what the billionaires kind of like drift down. But what's needed there is the education piece, in keeping policies or putting more money into systems that are keeping people longer into poverty or keeping them there isn't going to be
We want to
helpful.
lift people out of poverty.
Right.
We want to end poverty. We want to make sure that everyone can contribute what they have to give to this economy, to this country. That's the goal. And I think the way we do that is by unrigging the system, because working hard no longer pays. It really doesn't. You can work multiple jobs and still not get into the middle class. That's what we have to fix. And you're right, it's not just government. It's also churches and nonprofits and community groups. It's all the above. All of us have to be working to make sure that every single Texan, every single American can fulfill their God-given potential.
All right, pause. Sorry. Please
Great job.
return to your
Thank
seat.
you.
Hey, good job, everybody.
Hey, before we go any further, we want to take a moment to say thanks so much to Straight Arrow News for powering the fact checks in this video. Straight Arrow News is on a mission to raise the bar on journalism in a time of media bias and mistrust. Straight Arrow News helps you quickly find trusted information you need to understand the news, allowing you to dive deep into the topic.
This might sound weird, but you want the media to be biased. So let me explain. You do not want media that's neutral. Neutral media cannot speak truth to power, because in order for media to speak truth to power, the media has to take a stance against that power. It can't just remain neutral. And in order for the media to be objective, to be truthful and honest, the media has to be willing to call balls and strikes. It can't be neutral. You don't want a neutral answer to the question, what is 2 + 2 equals? The media needs to be able to say 2 + 2 = 4. It has to be biased in favor of objectivity and the truth and, statistics and empirical data.
That matter to you and the world around you. Their work is trying to break the bias bubble, helping you understand how every side of the political spectrum is reporting on a story, so you get a full picture of the news. That's why we're so happy to be partnering with.
And also, it's good to know how different sides are talking about different things. They may have good points that your side isn't addressing, but the point of seeing what the different sides are talking about is not for you to pretend that everybody has the right answer, or everybody's honest, or whatever. It's just so that you know what's out there, and then you can assess it. Some of the things that people say are going to be ignorant. Some of the things that people say are going to be untrue. Some of the things that people say are going to be dishonest. You need to be able to assess that. It's not just getting everybody's different ideas and just being like, oh, I don't fucking know, right? Be smart. Be a critical thinker. Critical thinking does not mean being neutral. It means assessing the information to figure out what is valid and what is sound.
Straight Arrow News. They deliver the facts, unbiased, balanced, and designed to make sense of a complex world, getting you the clarity you deserve and news you can trust. Go to san.com/surrounded.
Go to SA. Whoa!
In the description to check
Show,
it out.
bro.
By clicking that link, you're not just supporting this channel. You also take advantage of a better way to get the news. Welcome back to Trustworthy Journalism. Thanks again to Straight Arrow News for partnering with us on this episode. Now, let's get into it.
My next claim is that immigrants make America stronger and richer.
This is objectively true. From an economic standpoint, it's not even close. Immigrants do overall, they grow the GDP, they pay more into the system than they take out. They're a net economic benefit. The only issue that you might have is if they take your jobs or they compete with you for your wages or whatever. But we even know that is not a statistically significant issue. So overall, they are overwhelmingly positive for the economy. Now, whether or not they're positive for the social fabric of the country, conservatives make that argument. That's a different question. That's a little bit more of a qualitative question. But on economics, there's an objective, empirical answer to that question, and they are overwhelmingly positive for the economy. Within reason, of course. You don't want to you don't right now. The level of immigration we have is positive for the economy. If we were to 3x that number, that may not be the case, right? But that's not the situation we live in today. We have 1x the number. We have the amount that we currently have, and it's not causing any issues. It's actually very positive.
Hi, Jade.
Yes, nice
Hi,
to meet you.
It's nice to meet you. Let me just lay out what I mean by this, because I know it sounds a little controversial. I'm a 8th generation Texan. My family's been here since it was Mexico. My mom actually grew up in Laredo, right on the Texas-Mexico border. I feel like we Texans understand immigration more than people outside of Texas because we live with it every day, the benefits and the challenges. The more I travel the state, the more I've realized that most Texans are in the same spot on this issue. The metaphor I've used is that our southern border should be like our front porch. There should be a giant welcome mat out front and a lock on the door. We can both welcome the stranger, welcome immigrants who want to contribute to this economy, who want to live the American dream.
Yes. Good, good. See, this is the thread, the needle, or sorry, threading the needle in messaging that liberals should be doing. And it's not even that fucking hard. I don't know why it's taken so long for liberals to get good at this. Like, you can't enforce the border without being like a bloodthirsty, racist, savage barbarian to people who are, at the border or whatever. It's been framed by the right that you have to choose one or the other. That's absolute, utter fucking bullshit. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You can enforce the border without being like an insane sociopathic monster. You don't have to do that. It's stupid.
And richer, and we can keep people out who mean to do us harm. I will say what I think not enough Democrats have been willing to say. Joe Biden failed us on our southern border. I remember talking to my colleagues in the Texas legislature who represent border communities. They told me about the utter chaos on the border. And that failure by Joe Biden paved the way for Donald Trump to come in.
This is kind of positive. I mean, I don't really know enough about Biden during his administration with the border to say one way or the other. Some of it might be overhyped by right-wing media, but James Talarico saying this gives him credibility and legitimacy to his audience that he's not so partisan, so biased that he can't like admit issues in his own party, and that he's willing to listen to and consider the issues that the other side raises. Yeah, so let's keep going.
With masked men in unmarked vehicles, secret police, tearing parents from their children, kidnapping people off the street. I think both parties have failed us on this issue. I think we all should come together and finally pass comprehensive immigration reform, more immigration judges, more border patrol, modernize our ports of entry where most of the fentanyl gets in, reform our asylum system, relieve the visa backlog. We should finally fix this problem instead of grandstanding on it.
I completely agree with you on that. But what I disagree with is the claim that immigrants as a whole are making America stronger. I think there is a lot of nuance that is not added to that claim. I think that there are a lot of immigrants, and immigrants are needed in this country. A lot of these immigrants are the ones that are driving America forward. I also think that there are a lot of immigrants who, America is supposed to be a melting pot. America is supposed to have people from everywhere come together, and there's this concept of assimilation where there should be partial assimilation. You don't, no one should be forced to completely assimilate. And
okay, at least he's willing to say that. Maybe some of the rhetoric is actually starting to punch through. I will make this argument till I'm fucking dead in the grave. You cannot simultaneously pretend that you are all about American freedom and liberty while simultaneously demanding that people assimilate. Those two things cannot live with each other. They are fundamentally contradictory. You either believe that Americans have the life and the liberty to live their lifestyle as they want to, live different things, have different ideas, different opinions, or you believe that everybody's supposed to think the same, look the same, act the same, have the same lifestyle. You cannot have both at the same time. Now, you can have kind of a balance in between, but you can't have one extreme or the other at the same time. That doesn't work. And right-wing media has gotten away with simultaneously talking about everybody needing to assimilate to their lifestyle while also pretending that they like liberty and freedom because they just repeat the slogan over and over again. The other thing that I will always make the argument on is there has never, ever, ever been a time in the United States history where there's been one single culture to assimilate to. Never. Not before the colonists arrived to the country. Before the colonists arrived to the country, there were thousands of distinct different Native American tribes. When the colonists arrived in the country, they came from different countries. They came from different religious sects. They were cut off from each other, so they developed differently. The North and the South had fundamental, massive disagreements in their culture, obviously, from history. Conservatives have almost this idea that assimilation to the United States is assimilation to like this rural cowboy conservative culture. Cowboy culture did not exist in the United States for like 100 years. So where did they get this idea that that is the culture of the United States? And by the way, that cowboy culture was centered in the Southwest, and it originates from Spanish Mexican vaqueros in that region. They treat it like it's like a white Caucasian thing. It actually evolved out of like Mexican and Spanish people that were living in that region, which is ironic because their idea of assimilation is assimilating to white people, right? Meanwhile, the culture that they kind of worship the most, that they glorify and make legendary in their mind the most, comes from the Mexican, Spanish people that they hate so much. There's never been a single culture in the United States to assimilate to, not before the United States, not during the founding era of the United States, not during the American Civil War, not through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. There's differences between rural and urban throughout the entire history of the United States. There's differences in, cuisine and the demographic composition. You had a lot of African Americans in the South for a very long time. You had Spanish-speaking, Mexican people that were in the Southwest for a long time. You had, Germanic people that moved up north when they immigrated. You had Italians. You had Jewish people in certain, urban centers like in New York and New Jersey. Right? There has never, ever, ever been a single culture to assimilate to in the United States. And that's a great thing. That's a positive thing. The idea that that's bad is betrayed by the fact that we are the most successful country despite that. We are the most successful country despite that. So the idea that multiculturalism has destroyed us, it will destroy us, is betrayed by the history. That's not true. And also, the real thing that we should assimilate to, the real shared cultural identity that we have, is that we don't have one. Is that we are a country of freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, freedom of association. All these different rights and freedoms that we have to be different, to act different, to live our life differently, to not have other people tell us what to do. That is actually the one thing that people should assimilate to. And the reality is that conservatives have had 250 years to assimilate to that fundamental principle, that fundamental axiom of American society, of the Constitution of the Declaration of Independence, and they have failed to do so. Another thing that I want to say about this is that when conservatives talk about assimilation, they are pretending that they are America and the rest of us Americans are not. They are pretending that their particular ideas and their culture and everything, they're pretending that they get to decide for the rest of the country, that theirs is the correct one, and that all of the rest of us, ours is not. We are Americans. This is our country too. Fuck them for trying to pretend that they get to tell the rest of the world and the rest of America what it means to be American. We are every bit as American as they are. We have been here as long as they have been. They can fuck off with that nonsense.
To change who they are and change their beliefs to fit in. But at the same time, whenever we have people coming to this country and then going out on the streets yelling that they hate the country, it's counterintuitive.
Well, where is this happening? This is a talking point that conservatives keep repeating. The people who say they hate the country, frankly speaking, are like young, leftist American citizens. Immigrants that are in the country, I don't see immigrants doing this. I mean, sure, there's millions of people, you could find one example, but this is not a big, widespread thing among immigrants in the country. It's a widespread thing among young, white, college left-wingers, ironically enough. And that's their freedom of speech. They're allowed to do that. I mean, it's fundamental to our country, our country's founding, the idea that you're able to dissent from the leadership, from the government. So you have that right to do that. But when they try to pin it on immigrants, it's a way of them trying to make an excuse for why Like, they don't want the immigrants here. They don't like them, and they're trying to find any kind of story, any kind of narrative that they could spin. They're eating the cats and dogs. They say they hate the country. No, no, they don't. These aren't things that they're doing. Where are you getting this from? You're getting it from the media that you consume.
And it really does hurt America as a whole.
Do you
Does
know
it,
any undocumented immigrants?
No, I do not.
When I was a teacher on the west side of San Antonio, I taught a lot of students who were undocumented. And I don't want to stereotype, but those students tended to be the most patriotic, the hardest working students that I had in the classroom. They understood something about this country that even I, as a native-born American, often take for granted. They believed that this was a land of opportunity, and they were ready to do whatever it took to make it in this country. And that's what generations of Italian and Irish immigrants did in this country. And I think if we welcome folks who want to contribute, who want to be Americans, it's going to make us stronger and richer because it already has.
All right, pause. You've been voted out by the majority.
Great job.
Please return to
Yeah,
your
so
seat.
nice to meet you.
Why is this thing?
Hi.
So
Grow
I would
up,
argue
only
that
things.
as someone who has my dad's side, they come from immigrants and things like that. I'm originally from Florida, so
Yeah.
I'm African and black, however you want to put it.
Yeah.
But I would say I'm in favor of stricter borders, mainly because when we have so many immigrants now that are just coming like as a flock and from everywhere, from India, from Japan, however you want to put it. I think what's happening now is that like just how the guy who won for New York, what's his name?
Mamdani.
Mamdani.
Yes.
I think that the people when there's too many immigrants coming, they think that they know America better than the originators. Or
What is he talking about? Is Mamdani, is he an immigrant or something? Let's see. I don't believe Mamdani's an immigrant at all, is he? Early life. Was born in Uganda. He's going, okay. First, both his parents are Indian descent. His father's Muslim, blah, blah, blah. His mother's Hindu. His mother, Mamdani, lived until he was 5, and his family moved to Cape Town in South Africa. Oh, he's been all over the place. St. George and Mowbray. He later said he experienced living in Cape Town, blah, blah, blah. Finally moved to the United States when he was 7. Okay, so he is an immigrant technically, but he's been here since he was like 7 fucking years old. So he's been here since he was a kid. Basically his formative years would have been in the United States. Yes, those early childhood years are formative, but like most of his formative years were spent in the United States. But also, like, who does he think voted for Mamdani? Does he think a bunch of immigrants voted for Mamdani? No, the citizens of New York voted for Mamdani. And unless the entire population of New York are immigrants, or even the majority of the people who voted for him are immigrants, the reality is that you, this guy who's sitting across from Talarico here, you think you know better than the natives of New York. The natives of New York, they know what's best for themselves. They decided to vote for Mamdani. So where are you getting this idea that the immigrants come in and they get to decide that they know better than the founding stock or whatever of the country? The citizens of New York voted for Mamdani.
or people that are born here generationally, and it causes a conflict on government. Like, Ramazani, I don't know how to say his name, the Indian guy,
Okay.
who was born here, right? And now he's a part of the government. And I think that kind of plays a part in religion, government, what we believe in, because a lot of them may not be Christian, maybe Buddhist, and they may just have a different ideology.
Yeah.
And may not like what you see for us, they may not see for us, and they may try to change it.
Yeah.
Same way.
By the way, this is what I'm talking about, right? Is that he's talking about, oh, they may have a different religion from us and everything. He has not assimilated to American culture, ironically. Because in our very First Amendment to the Constitution, it establishes freedom of religion, but he does not believe in freedom of religion. He has not assimilated to America, even though he's blaming everybody else for not assimilating to it, ironically enough. He doesn't actually believe in the principles of the Constitution or the founding of the country.
How Indians come over and get H-1B visas.
I wonder too, is this guy born in the United States, or where does his family come from? Because I'm going to pull that card, because I don't give a fuck, and I'm not going to mince words or anything. He's under the fucking delusion that the white people who kind of spread this narrative, not all white people, but like particularly these like reactionary nativist white people, talking about like, oh, the founding stock of the country. Motherfucker, you are not included in that. I know that they sometimes will play lip service to, oh, well, the slaves were brought here, so they're part of the founding. They don't consider you part of the founding stock. When they say the founding stock, they mean white Europeans, Anglo-Saxon. WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. That's what they actually mean. They don't consider you part of that fucking group. You're not in the club, bro. They're not. Tokens get spent. You're behaving like a token, and you're gonna get spent by them.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
And they bond together, make money together, and don't want any other race, culture working with them as a whole.
Where does that come from? Where are you getting that from? They do. There is a tendency for immigrant populations to form. I don't really like the term enclaves because it has a very negative connotation, but they will form kind of like communities where they kind of live around each other. But it makes sense, right? Because a lot of times the native population that lives there already, they already have their networks. They already have their own established little communities and everything. And so the immigrants that move into that area, they don't really have a choice. In order to have like a sense of community, have an ability to kind of like help each other and everything, they do have to kind of form some sort of bond with other people around them. And so they're going to form a bond with the other people who also immigrated there. Now, you don't want it to be that everybody's sectioned off and they don't intermingle. You want these, even though they have these different communities, you want them to kind of cross mingle with each other. That's ideally what you want. But just the fact that you might have like a Chinatown, like for example, I live in the Bay Area. There's Chinatown in San Francisco, very famous. Tourists go there all the time. The Chinese that live there, they very much have like a very, obviously like a very distinct kind of community to themselves living there, but they're very open to the tourists. They rely on the tourism. They intermingle with the tourists. You go there, you'll have them, talk to you and have conversations with you. And they themselves will travel outside of their little community to visit other parts of the town. So it's not necessarily a problem. And especially if you actually believe in the concept of the United States of freedom of religion, freedom of lifestyle, stuff like that, you shouldn't have an issue with this.
So that's why I believe overall, stricter borders should be put in place and a stricter citizenship process, because it's not the same as what it used to be. It used to be a lot easier, but now it's getting a lot harder, which is a good thing because,
I agree that we need more secure borders.
Yeah.
We're not disagreeing on that.
Mm-hmm.
What I am saying is that America as a melting pot is what makes us so special as a country, but it's also what makes us richer and stronger as a country.
Right.
What is this operation for? I
I
don't really know what it does.
That Social Security is going to go bankrupt?
Maybe once or twice.
Yeah. Do you know why Social Security isn't bankrupt today?
Because of immigrants.
Because of immigrants.
All right.
Undocumented people.
Pause. So sorry. You've been voted out. Please return to your seat.
So nice to see you. Yeah, great job. Hey, Malik. So we just got cut off.
Yes.
Have you heard the claim that Social Security is going to go bankrupt?
Yes.
And do you know why Social Security is not bankrupt today?
No.
So it's immigrants that are keeping Social Security solvent. Undocumented people pay into Social Security.
This is
so
true. This is a good point to bring up.
And they don't take any benefits in return.
Right.
So they single-handedly, as a community in the shadows, are keeping this system of ours solvent. 5% of the entire armed forces are immigrants. These are people who can't
also
even vote.
Really good thing to bring
they're
up.
willing to lay down their lives for this country.
So
And we
it's
have
real-
7 million. We have 7 million jobs that still need to be.
Perfect. Did you see what happened there? Talarico is controlling the flow of the conversation. He is taking it where he wants to go. He's not being rude, right? The other guy wanted to like shift to something. He said, well, wait a minute, let me finish this point. He is taking up space in the conversation. He is not feeling like he has to respond or let them dictate it. You are a politician. You are working in politics. Your job is to make your talking points the conversation. That is what it is. That is unfortunately the game that is played. Play that game.
Filled.
Right.
We have more jobs than there are workers in this country. And so my argument here, this claim that I'm making, is that by welcoming immigrants who want to contribute, who want to build their own American dream, they actually help benefit all of us and the entire economy.
I would agree with that, but I think this conversation is going in a extremely dangerous direction.
Okay.
100%. And I'll tell you why. So it's really easy to identify a problem.
Yeah.
But what's the solution?
Yeah.
Let's talk about immigration. And I would agree.
Yeah.
They do make this country better. And I agree that huge welcome doormat and then locking the door.
Yep.
But okay, what's the process of people actually getting to the door in the first place?
Yeah.
What's going to be deemed fair? What's going to be deemed unfair?
Yep.
That's where that's what's going to. Because any
Yes.
politician can say, yes, immigrants, good. Poor people should have money. It's like that. Okay, cool. But like, what does that process look like?
Well, and I want to talk about the specific solutions, but I do just want to acknowledge that both parties are not actually talking about welcoming immigrants and securing the border.
Good, good. So many times conservatives, right-wingers, they will try to play this game where they will pretend like, oh, you know, we all agree, like we all fundamentally want the same thing. No, you don't. Don't gaslight me. You don't want the same thing. Do you want gay people to have the right to be married? No, you don't. Do you want the government to have a safety blanket for poor people and stuff? No, you don't really. Do you really want to actually have room for immigrants in this country? No, you don't. So don't bullshit me. Don't bullshit the conversation. Don't do this thing where you're kind of like prompting me to be diplomatic, prompting me to pretend to be neutral and fair while you're not doing so. Let's be honest, you don't actually believe that. You don't actually hold yourself to that standard.
I think the problem here is we don't have candidates or elected officials who are speaking to the giant middle ground where most Texans and most Americans are. Most people are pro-immigrant and pro-security. And so am I.
Yes,
To answer your question,
you could do both. Doesn't have to be one or the other.
What would comprehensive reform look like?
Yes.
A lot of people say immigrants should come here the right way. I agree. The problem is there's not really a right way anymore. There's not even a line that moves at any real pace. There are people who have applied to be here who have waited 20, 30 years. Some people have died before they got a response back. That's not a line. If we want a real line, it has to be a fast-moving line. Okay. We've got to prioritize people who are going to fill the jobs that need to be filled. Okay. And we want to prioritize people who are actually claiming asylum and who need safety. Okay. Those are the groups in my mind that need to be prioritized. But we're never going to be able to process those folks unless we have enough immigration judges, unless we have enough border patrol, unless we modernize the ports of entry. 93% of the fentanyl that comes into this country comes through the ports of entry. It doesn't come over the Rio Grande.
Right.
It comes through the ports. And we don't have the technology or the manpower to detect that fentanyl. So those are the things we have to do. Yeah, please.
Real quick, because like I said, this is where it gets really dangerous because that's what we can
what is this conversation portraits?
Okay, we've identified the problem. The problem is there's not a quote-unquote right process. But at that same time, there needs to be some process.
Yeah.
So with the line, what does that process look like? Knowing that there's not a right and a quote-unquote right, like what? Okay, so what's the line going to be?
And a lot of the problem is manpower, right? We don't have enough folks in this system who are doing this work. The current administration has grown the size of ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, except it's not people doing immigration and customs enforcement. It is a secret police force that is terrorizing communities in North Texas. There was a mom and dad, the Vargases. They own a dry cleaners here in Dallas. They're beloved by their customers, by their neighbors. They were dropping their daughter off at Texas Tech University, one of the best universities in the state of Texas. They were on their way back from dropping her off at school. I stopped them, detained them. They are still in a detention center. I do not want my law enforcement or my immigration enforcement officials focused on the Vargases. I want them focused on murderers and rapists and gang members, people who mean to do us harm. When we devote law enforcement resources to going after the Vargases, it makes us all less safe. So I'm just asking for sanity in the system.
All right, pause. You've been voted out by the majority. Please
Great job, Lisa. Yeah.
Okay. That's like a long fucking time. I think we finally got the
good to see you. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So you told
interface
a really
setup.
horrible story. That's a very
I want to
sad
reduce
story.
the spacing here.
But also, they're undocumented. So this isn't just legal people who are here that came from another thing. It's a definitely emotional story. It makes me feel horrible for those people. I think there needs to be some better processes here. But
I could already tell from the way this guy sucked. This guy doesn't care about people. He's a sociopath. He hides it like, oh, you gave us such an emotional story, and you know, I care about these people. No, you don't, bro. Just be honest. You don't give a fuck about these people. You're not moved by the emotion because you don't care about the other people. Just say it.
but they're still illegal, right? They're not.
You know, I don't want to hurt you, but like I just, you know, we don't really have a choice. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? No, I don't know what you mean. I think you just kind of you're just trying to pretend that, you know, you're more human than you are, when reality is that you're just kind of sociopathic. Which, just own that. Just, you know, it's fine. Own it.
Supposed to be here. It's wrong by government standards, right? I think borders are very biblical. We see Nehemiah, the first thing he did for his country when he returned to Israel, he built a wall.
It's also super fucking disgusting is using a religion to justify your own, like, sociopathic tendencies, desire to discriminate and stuff like that. Like, the Bible says very clearly to treat immigrants like your own, kind of thing. Does it also make references to like national borders and stuff like that? Probably, sure, probably, right? But it probably takes a more balanced view to frame it as like, oh, the Bible actually told me that it's actually good to beat the shit out of minorities and deport them and to treat them like they're subhuman. No, right? And I know he's not saying that here, but that's the policy that he's supporting in the current administration, right? That's what he's trying to justify. So like, no, the Bible doesn't really do that. And it goes to show that this particular person, you don't really believe the Bible. You use the Bible to, you know, justify your behavior.
Right? He built a wall to keep those that wanted to harm them out. And, you know, I'm not saying that everyone coming here wants to harm people, but I'm just saying that, like, biblically this reinforces it. And so, I feel like
I agree. I believe in borders.
Yeah.
And I don't believe in amnesty. Let's take the Vargases. We were talking about how they are sympathetic, hardworking small business owners in our community. They've been here for decades. There needs to be a path to citizenship. That is not the same thing as amnesty, because you're right.
Is there not already a path to citizenship?
No, and that's the problem. We've got millions of people who are living here in the shadows, and there is no path for them to actually come into compliance, which I want them to do. I'm a law and order Democrat. I believe that laws matter, and there should be consequences for breaking the law.
Okay.
But here's what I will say, Tyler. We do recognize in our legal system that there are different punishments for different kinds of offenses.
Yes, proportionality.
Being here without documentation.
This is the other thing that conservatives will get away with. They'll do like, oh, they're here illegally, therefore they don't have due process. They're here illegally, therefore it doesn't matter what we do with them. We would never treat this mentality to anything else. Like, oh, this person crossed the street illegally, now they don't get due process. Now they don't have rights. Now we can abuse them and beat them and stuff. No, the punishment has to fit the crime. And the crime, and they do this intentionally to kind of like hoping it just kind of goes over your head and you're not noticing what they're doing. The crime that they're talking about is someone who crossed the border illegally, but they're otherwise working a job, contributing to the taxpaying system. It's not a crime worthy of death and torture, but they treat it as if it is.
There are criminal offenses like murdering, raping someone, and those things are treated differently. And so, in my mind, and again, I'm open to negotiating how the details work, but there needs to be, in broad strokes, a pathway to citizenship where they pay a fine for being here without documentation or crossing the border illegally. There should be some penalty for that. I'm not disagreeing. They should also have to pay back taxes. Again, immigrants, undocumented immigrants in particular, pay a lot of taxes and don't get benefits in return, but they may be missing some of those taxes because they weren't citizens. They need to pay those back taxes. And they need to go through the citizenship process. They got to take the test.
Right now, Talarico is speaking to the audience. He's not speaking to this guy across from him, because you can kind of pick up the guy across from him does not care about other people. He doesn't care about immigrants. He probably doesn't like them or hates them, and he's just looking for any excuse to try to frame it as he's doing this because of the Bible, he's doing this because, oh, it's just a law. But there's something very smug, very smarmy about the way that he talks about it. Very kind of ingenuine and dishonest. So if you know that, at that point, you know the other person, there's nothing you can ever do to change their mind. And it's hard to even do that because you know that they're not even operating in the conversation in good faith. So they're not actually listening and being considerate of the things that you're talking about. So at that point, you shift your strategy to, okay, I can't really talk to this person. I'm just going to use them as a springboard to talk to the audience.
100% agree.
They got to learn about our government. They got to
You
learn
don't
about our
100%
culture.
agree. I guarantee
All that
it.
is so important. If they do all those things, and they've been here a long time, and they've been contributing, I think they should be brought
You
into
just
compliance.
said they need to go through the immigration process, but then you just told me a minute ago that there is no immigration process, that they can't become citizens.
I'm talking about creating one. I'm talking about, that's what I mean when I say comprehensive immigration reform. It is building a process to where we can bring these millions of people living in the shadows.
Do you see what I mean, by the way, with the ingenuity, not ingenuity, but the ingenuineness of what the other guy? From all of that conversation that Talarico said, or that whole part that he said, his takeaway was, okay, but you said there's a process, but then you said there wasn't a process. He was just looking for some sort of like gotcha, some sort of like, oh, well, actually, right?
Into compliance because there's not a process right now. And what you're asking is the process on the front end, how they got in here. And I hear so many people say they should come in the right way. We should create a process where there is a right way, where there's a line and it's a fast-moving line. I mean, I think you would agree, Tyler, that someone shouldn't
wouldn't
wait
agree.
20 years
He would not agree.
to hear back.
He might lie,
That's
but
not a
I don't think
process
he
at all.
actually agrees
And
at all.
encourages, that encourages people to come here the wrong way. So I'm saying this is a systemic
pause.
problem.
You've been voted out. Please return
Great
to your
job, Tyler.
seat.
Yeah. Hi.
I don't understand, what is a
So nice to
focus
meet you.
target? I'll disable that for
So
now.
I hear everything you're saying. I take disagreement with you saying like the Democrats nor the Republicans actually did a good job on border policy, because as an immigration attorney, it started under the Obama administration and continued under the Biden
What started
administration,
under the
where
Obama
they
administration?
were deporting people for having crimes of moral turpitude. You would get these notice of deportation notices in the mail. So this idea or this notion that there was just this open border plan and nothing was being done is like not true. And in terms of them not hiring people, even the Trump administration has spent a lot of time creating different courts in El Paso and trying to force people to stay out of the border. And
Is interesting. I mean, they're supposed to be MAGA supporters. Oh, undecided. I was so fooled because for most of this conversation, everybody he's argued against seemed like they were conservative or MAGA. A lot of times Jubilee does this where I feel like they're kind of sneaky with how they choose their audience. They're not really fully honest. I don't know if you guys remember the Jordan Peterson Jubilee debate where it was like initially they released it as like Jordan Peterson versus atheists, like arguing Christianity or something. I don't forget what it was, and then they wound up changing the title because Jordan Peterson in the debate, like, he didn't actually come prepared, or he was trying to deflect to a different debate or like not own the position. Oh, that's what it was. It was Christianity because there was a few of them that asked him like, oh, so you're a Christian, you believe in God? And he kept saying, well, I don't want to talk about it. It's not about me. It's not. And it's like, okay, well, wait a second. You came here to debate Christianity, but you're not willing to actually state what your position on Christianity and religion God is, right? And so then Jubilee changed the title of their video afterwards to basically more favorable to the reframing of the conversation that Jordan Peterson wanted. So they do stuff like this, and I wonder, it's almost like some of the CNN or Fox News guest panels that they have sometimes where you find out later on that it wasn't really like this regular representative sample of voters. They like pulled like people who work in politics, you know what I mean? So it kind of feels like that, and I wonder if it's like that where it's supposed to be a bunch of undecided voters, but a lot of the people in the room are actually quite decided, and they're decided for the Republican Party.
make Mexico create.
Because she actually sounds like she might be more of an undecided voter, because if you listen to what she said, she made the point that she's making a point both about Obama and Biden, and then also made a point about Trump, right? It seems like she's so far, anyways, haven't really gotten too much into it. It seems so far that she is a little bit more neutral and kind of being a little bit more like trying to take a objective view at both of the groups and being like, okay, this group did that, this group did this. They actually both kind of did some things here. Let's see how it goes.
Courts. And even the Trump administration today is still hiring judges, immigration judges, and fast tracking people out of the country. So I don't understand what exactly you're saying, and especially when you say public safety, because if we look at what's happening, we have mass shootings that happen because of U.S. citizens, and so
these are all really good points. She's starting to sound to me more like a potentially a more left-leaning voter where she may be undecided on Talarico because he's not left enough for her. Because if you paid attention to her criticism, it wasn't even necessarily criticism, I just wasn't sure at that time. But she was bringing up how, actually Biden and Biden and Obama and Trump's immigration policy was actually more similar than people say, right? A lot of times that's something that left-wingers will bring up because left-wingers want like a way more lax immigration policy than everybody else, and so they actually dislike that Obama and Biden enforced immigration more than they wanted, right?
Like conflating of
in this point about like she's kind of bringing up how the right kind of is dishonest about the impact that immigrants have. Now, that's a position that I have too. It's just that you don't ordinarily hear this from moderate voters. You almost always hear it from voters who are left of center to far left, right? It's a legitimate point, by the way. I'm just saying it's not something that I associate with right-wing voters or voters who are more moderate. Now, there might be voters who are more moderate, more in the middle, who do have this view. It just seems like a lot of them kind of take their talking points from what is the common talking points out in the rest of civilization. And the rest of our society doesn't really talk about how, when we talk about drugs, when we talk about crime, it's not really coming from immigrants. That seems to be something that only liberal media makes an effort to inform their viewers of.
Illegal immigration and public safety, I just think is like a misinformation.
But then again, did she say,
and
I think
as
she
a
might have said that she was an immigration lawyer or
me,
something?
I expect you to come up with an argument that makes sense. Like you said, okay, we want to create pathways to citizenship. Well, how do you do that for people who are illegal? We had DAPA, we had DACA that created work visas, but that wasn't a pathway to citizenship. And that's not fair to the people who have H-1B visas. That's not fair to people who have K visas for their fiancés. So I'm just a little confused as to why we would fast track people who are here undocumented and ignore people who have been waiting in the visa process line for.
Yeah, I hear that. I do hear that it is a little bit unfair that, if you've been waiting and going through the regular process, why should we, allow people who didn't to, if they're undocumented, to have legal status in the United States. But at the same time, it's kind of like the reverse question is, well, what do you want to do with these people that have been here? They weren't supposed to be here technically, but they're otherwise being, productive members of society. They're part of the community. Maybe at this point they don't even know what life is like back in the country that they came from. Like, do you really want to just ship them back over the border? I think that we should, make it so that we have less of that, or that doesn't happen anymore. Yes, but I think that the ones that are here, it's kind of like a, okay, we're cutting it off now, but the ones that are here, like, we're not just going to kick you out, but we don't want to make that a normalized thing going forward. Much in the same way that, I'll try to think of an example here, like, try to think of a good example. It's okay, whatever, we'll move on.
For a long time.
Whoa,
well,
what the hell?
Thank you for your work on this topic. I want to just clarify a few things. I never said that we had an open border policy. I also
Where did she get that from?
think we should fast track anybody. What I'm trying to do is create a system that works. And when I speak about the failures of both political parties, including my own, it is the failure to pass comprehensive immigration reform. And that's a failure from George W. Bush to Barack Obama to Donald Trump the first time, Joe Biden, and Donald Trump the second time. What I'm saying is we should be going after the cartels, not our communities. We should be hunting down human traffickers,
That's the result bar.
moms and babies. We should be deporting gang members, not small business owners.
But we did that. So
and I think that was great to have a prioritization in terms of deportation, much better than what we have now.
This is good that he's owning it, by the way, because some Democrats, some liberals might, try to shirk away from like taking a strong position one way or the other, because you're going to make someone upset. You're either going to make the people on the far left upset, or you're going to make the conservatives upset. So taking a strong stance, like, you know what, yeah, I want a humane system. I want to, create a pathway for the people that are here, but also I'm not going to get along, with your position of, we're not going to enforce things. Like, that might upset you, that might alienate a certain portion, but like, I can't please everybody. I'm just going to be honest about what my position is.
Now,
but when you deported crime or people that were a part of cartels, and we were doing that in like the 90s, the early 2000s, you happen to destabilize Central America, which caused an influx of immigration that we've never seen before. So this idea of like, let's knock down doors and do come after the cartel, I agree with, but I'm confused. You also said we had to do something about people who had been here undocumented.
That's right.
My question is, what does your actual comprehensive policy look like for those people who have been waiting in line?
Yes.
Because we do have a pathway to citizenship through visas.
Yeah, like I said,
I don't know what drug cartels, drug cartels and gang members have to do with like visas, because I think if you're part of a drug cartel, or you're part of a gang, I don't think you're eligible for a visa, or you'd have your visa revoked. But like her position, right, there might be some truth to that, right? That, you know, when we deported all these like members of drug cartels and gang members, it just increased kind of like the drug cartel and gang prevalence in those countries, which may have also caused, you know, some immigration from people who are trying to flee that situation. But like, and this is a lot of times a problem with like some people who are way too ideological is, well, what is your solution then? That we just keep all of them here? Like, what are you saying we should do? Because that's also not a realistic or productive solution. Is, okay, we don't want to send them over there because they're just going to get concentrated over there. So what, we won't concentrate them here in our country? Right? Sometimes we can't avoid that there are going to be side effects. It's just a decision of what side effects can we live with. So maybe there is the side effect that we deport people with, like, you know, gang ties or cartel affiliations, and it causes some ripple effects in those countries. Okay, but that's a better alternative than just allowing drug cartels and gang members in the United States operate when they're not even supposed to be here.
What I'm saying is we have to bring them out of the shadows, because it makes us all safer and it makes us more prosperous. But I would love, I mean, you tell me, this is a conversation. You're much more of an expert in immigration law than I am. So tell me what you think that policy should look like.
I think if you do what was attempted to do for DACA and DAPA, if you've been here for 10 years or you were brought as a child and you were enrolled in school, you should have a pathway to citizenship. I do understand the fundamental policy of not breaking up families, but I don't understand how we allow their children to stay illegally. Like, do you let them stay, get pathways to citizenships, and then turn around and allow their family to do the family visas and make people return back to their original country?
I will give her credit here, and this is probably a bit beyond more than your average voter. She is wanting really clear specifics. And most people don't, they can't even think in those terms. Most people will say they want that, but they can't even think in that level of detail for politics. It sounds like she really does want like very specific, and this just may not be the format for that, right? Like those kind of details are probably going to be something that is crafted in Congress over hours and hours of hearings and deliberations and stuff of that nature. What the best you're going to get out of something like this is more of like a kind of general, like a general directional idea of kind of what you want, what you're looking for. The very specific details are something that has to be ironed out over a lot of hearings and conversations.
Because we have to remember, if we do that part of it, people go to jail when they go back. We have like laws in place with different countries, especially.
And again, so like, yes, I would just bite the bullet on this. Yeah, they're going to go back to jail in the countries that they came from because they're criminals. Like, well, what, you just want criminals to be out on the street? What are you saying, right?
In the Caribbean, where if you were in America illegally, you go to jail to come back. So when you go back, so there's no, to me, I don't think we should fast track undocumented workers. Or I think we should probably give people work visas, but I don't agree with you necessarily getting citizenship, because why would other people take the better route, which is not to be undocumented and actually apply for a visa?
Tell me, here's where I get hung up. Tell me what we do with kids. Because I was telling you how I, as a public school teacher, taught a lot of students who were undocumented. Many of them were saved by DACA. What do we do for those kids who were brought here through no fault of their own, without their consent? They now live here in America. This is the country they know. They know no other country.
What are we doing about their parents?
And you mentioned DAPA being an opportunity for
So,
parents. So
if we kept work visas for their family, their parents, and allowed them to stay, and they find a pathway to citizenship, if you crossed the border before you were like 6 and we can prove you were here, then I agree.
Okay,
But I think
yeah.
after that age, it gets too murky
This
with
is-
trying to, you know, because people will falsify documents, they'll falsify pictures, and so it gets harder
Yeah.
and harder to do.
I mean, and this is the beauty of public policy, right? When we step out of the algorithms and the news networks, people can sit down, even if they're maybe coming at it from a different point of view, and be able to hammer out a solution that actually works. And I always try to listen to the experts, because as a politician, there's no way you can be an expert in everything. And so I think you and I, some of the solutions we've just talked about, that's exactly what we need to be focused on if we're going to fix the system. I think secret police is not the answer, and we have got to find a better path forward on immigration.
All right, cause you've been voted out. Please return to your
Great
seat.
job. It's nice to meet you. Yeah. Hi, Terrence. Nice to meet you.
I'm kind of tough. I'm not soft.
Okay. Yeah.
So the border, I think it needs to be like closed for a while. You said that immigrants are some of the most patriotic in
My students.
Your students. I think that it is black people and foundational black Americans that are the most patriotic in America. Why are we not closing the border and using the drugs that are coming in, the money that's coming in from these drugs? Why are we spending money on private schools and letting these private companies fund these private schools, and not putting money into the black neighborhoods and brown neighborhoods that were here for so long in America and actually built what a lot of immigrants enjoy today.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do to kind of lend a hand in that way?
Yeah, I don't think we're disagreeing that we need way more investment in our communities, particularly black neighborhoods all over Texas. But I would say that this discussion about immigration also applies to black people because we have black immigrants. Not all immigrants that come to this country are from
Well, let me stop.
Latin America.
Let's cut out the black immigrants.
Sure,
right now,
sure.
I'm talking about foundational black Americans.
Yeah.
And foundational white Americans.
Yeah.
So I'm a native of Texas and a descendant of slavery, right? So why are we not focusing on that instead of like closing the border? I mean, these people, it's not America's job, right, to take care of someone's child and mother from another country.
Oh my God, have I been talking this entire time and haven't said anything? Basically, I don't know how far back I was muted, but the point I was making about this guy is that I don't know if he's not aware or if he's just ignoring, because it's such a typical thing for conservative-minded people that they always kind of think of themselves and their group as like special, and they kind of warp reality. They warp the way that they think. It's like a motivated reasoning to justify their own selfishness and bias. Foundational stock of America, white people and these black children of slaves, right? Okay, whatever. Does he not know, or is he just conveniently ignoring? Also, Native Americans were here, and also Spanish Latino people in the Southwest, particularly because that's where, you know, those areas were colonized by the Spaniards, and there's regions of the United States that used to belong to Mexico. Does he not know that, or is he just pretending, or does he just not care because he's neither of those things and he only really kind of cares about his own group?
That's that country's job, okay? If they want to put America as a dumping ground and then we have to now spend...
And then like this conversation, like a dumping ground, they talking about like these people like they're trash, like they're garbage, or that these other countries are dumping them here. The other countries aren't dumping them here. The other countries have issues for sure, but those people are coming here. They're not coming here because the governments of those countries are shipping their trash off.
Spend money to put these immigrants somewhere else.
And it's also framed as like we're taking care of them, but we've already been through this conversation. It's like this guy, like, have you not been engaging with the conversation for the past, I have to assume, probably a couple hours they've been at this point. They aren't leeching off the system. They're positive contributors to the system. They pay more into it than they take out. We're not taking care of them in that sense. They're actually kind of helping take care of us as a country.
That's unfair to me and other foundational white Americans.
So here's where I agree with you.
And other foundational white Americans. This is a very Myron-esque man. He thinks that he's part of the club. Bro, you're not part of the club. They don't consider you a foundational American. They consider you a former slave.
In our communities here in America.
How?
It's why I fight.
How?
It's why I fight for...
Look at how rude and fucking self-absorbed and entitled this guy is. Let him answer the question. How smug and condescending. I gotta look at this.
How do we need to invest in those communities?
Yeah, it's why I fight for public education in the Texas legislature.
Mm-hmm.
It's why I have fought to lower housing costs and provide more funding for affordable housing. Let's take education, just to drill down. As you know, I was a public school teacher, so I know the system from the inside out. By the time kids show up to kindergarten, the first grade, kids who grew up in poverty are already behind their peers.
Right.
Their affluent peers who have enrichment opportunities, have summer camps, who hear a lot more words because they have a stay-at-home parent or a parent who can stay at home versus kids who grew up in poverty. I think the way to fix that, and this is what I've worked on in the legislature, is high-quality, universal early childhood education for every child, no matter their zip code, no matter their race, no matter how much money their parents make. Because those first 1,000 days of a child's life, those first 3 years, are the most important in terms of brain development. And if they aren't catching up in kindergarten, you know that's just going to get worse the longer they're in the public education system.
Yeah, those are really good points.
And so we're setting up these students for failure. And I agree with you. These students they're children of promise. Again.
And here's another thing I want to say about this is that if you are a person, and it's not just like this guy, he's representing the Black American, former slave founding stock, right? If you're any persuasion, if you're like a white person or an Asian person or a gay person or a straight person or a male or female, if you have this mentality that I'm only going to advocate for me and my people, there is no reason, the social contract is broken at that point. There's no reason why anyone else in the country should give a fuck about your interests or your experiences or what you think you're entitled to. That is the model that you're creating, is that we don't have to care about or be considerate of the other groups in society. That is a model that is destructive to society, and it's destructive to your group. By the way, the founding stock of Black American society is something like 13% of the population. If the rest of our society had that same mentality, you do not have the numbers to advocate for yourself. You are only able to have, advocacy for your group, fairness for your group, by forming coalition and being mutually beneficial with the other groups that you share the society with. You don't have the numbers, bro, to be this arrogant or be this selfish.
They are made in the image of God. They have something to contribute. Our job is to create a system that allows them to do that.
Are you
and I think
willing,
early childhood education is a key part of it.
Are you willing to take away the money that we're putting toward bringing other immigrants in? Because
you see the zero-sum mentality that we have to take away money from another group in order to support his group. That's not how it works. It's a false dichotomy. It's a false choice. It's the way that Republicans like to frame it and stuff. It doesn't work that way. And again, the immigrants that are coming in, we're not on net. They're putting more money in than they're taking out. It's not like we are subsidizing them on net.
Because most immigrants take away from the jobs. A lot of people can't find jobs.
And yeah, this is why he believes this. The right has made a big effort to convince Black voters that to be anti-immigrant because the immigrants are coming after their jobs. Now, the immigrants really only kind of create pressure on supply of jobs at the very lowest end of the economic ladder. And that doesn't affect most Americans. But it is true that for a lot of members of the African American community, they are in that lower socioeconomic threshold. And so they are competing with jobs. That is true, right? But there are a lot of ways to address the poverty and social issues in the African American community. Republicans want to frame it as the only factor, the only thing to focus your attention to on there is by targeting this other minority group. That's how they want to frame it. Number one, because they want to use you to go after immigrants. Number two, because they don't want you to pay attention to things like wage, minimum wage standards for lower end workers. They don't want you to consider things like reparations. That's a Hail Mary. That's probably not going to happen, but they don't even want you to talk about that. They don't want you to talk about, investment into the Black communities. They don't want you to talk about unionization. They don't want to talk about, or they don't want you to focus on the fact that, if you're from a demographic group of generational poverty and ghettoization, your networks are smaller, your access to opportunities are lessened, right? But they don't want to do things like DEI, which are trying to, intervene in that negative feedback loop to try to, offer opportunities to that, historically disadvantaged group. They don't want you to consider any of those other factors. They want to use that anxiety you have to only target another minority group. It's a divide and conquer strategy.
jobs after they graduate
Here's where I'll
college.
disagree with you.
It takes a long time for them to do that because most of even the idea has to be sped up in order to get that job, because an immigrant can get that job and can get that job for way less.
So we've talked about where we agree, which is investment in all kinds of neighborhoods, but investment for Americans. Where we disagree, I think, is this idea that immigrants as a whole are a drain on this country. That's where I strongly disagree, because these immigrants are doing jobs that native-born Americans won't do. And here I'll give you an example. Let me just give you an example.
I disagree. How do you know that?
I'll give you an example.
Let me
give you.
I mean, there's economic data on that. There's studies on that. Multiple different organizations across the political spectrum. He may not know that because he's probably never bothered to actually look at any of those things. He just took Republicans' word for it. Again, there is some overlap between the immigrant population and the African American population, especially in those like low socioeconomic areas. But it's only an overlap. It's not like a circle. They're not competing for all of the same jobs. It's just there are some areas where that is the case.
Example.
But generally, because there's millions of people, you're always going to have situations where you're going to have one or two, a few, where you have immigrants competing with citizens for jobs. But on net, overall, that's not the case. Immigrants are usually taking jobs that American citizens don't want to work, or American citizens, have no need to take those jobs because there's jobs that have better benefits, that have better pay. One thing that I always bring up when people try to bring up this talking point is, if immigrants are taking all the jobs from American citizens, why do we have a historically low unemployment rate? If immigrants were taking all these jobs, the unemployment rate for U.S. citizens would be higher, but that's not the case. And it's because the economy that we have currently is big enough that it has enough jobs both for the American citizens who want to work and the immigrants who want to work. Now, there are people who fall into that U6 unemployment number of people who aren't looking for work, especially a lot of like young men, some older men, stuff like that. But is it because they're competing with jobs with immigrants? I don't think so. I think the reality is that those people who are not looking for work are not willing to take the kind of jobs that immigrants are willing to take, or they're not even living in the kind of areas that these immigrants are living in and doing work in. Americans don't want to work the kind of jobs that immigrants work because immigrants are not getting paid well and they're working jobs that are like highly labor intensive. There's a lot of people who, when they say that they'll take any job, the reality is that that's not 100% true. There is a threshold where they're not willing to go underneath that threshold, and they'd rather, go on unemployment or live with a family member. They're not going to go all the way. They're not going to relocate to the middle of fucking nowhere in the countryside to pick grapes. They could do that. I guarantee you the majority of people on that U6 number are not doing that.
Who did you ask that said they don't want that job?
I talked to an avocado farmer in California who's been running this farm for 20 years. He said he has never had a native-born American apply to work for one of his jobs.
See?
And let me ask you a question.
And it's true. It's probably true. I bet you anything.
How many black people are in California?
And so here's the question, like, do you actually think, okay, besides the narrative and the story and the I don't know, whatever Republicans are trying to spin, does anyone actually believe that you have a lot of black Americans in California who are going out to the fields in the middle of, I don't know, let's find some of these random cities in the Central Valley. Central Valley, California on the maps. Okay. So let's pretend somewhere like this, Rosewood. What does this place look like? Let's just drop a pin in here. Do we really believe that there's just all these black Americans who are who come out here looking for jobs competing with immigrants? Is that actually happening? I don't believe that to be the case. I don't think that's true. I think most black Americans live in the inner cities, which is an issue. It's a problem, right? Because inner cities have a lot of drugs, have a lot of crime. It's hard in general. Like inner cities historically across demographics, across history are always going to be areas that are, have a lot of crime and stuff like that. But that is where they congregate around because they're in that the lower socioeconomic class. They're not out in the middle of What's another good one? Maybe Watsonville? Is Watsonville the right one? I mean, Watsonville probably does have it because this is the actual city. What's the city I'm thinking of? I'm not thinking of Watsonville. There's another one. It takes something like this. I don't even know how to pronounce this. Pasines? Like, it really, like, there's a bunch of black people out here that are competing with the immigrants that are working the fields here. Like, no, get real, bro. Like, if you wanted those jobs, they're there, but they just don't pay well. You know, they're probably not paying any better than the fucking McDonald's, and at least at the McDonald's, you're working in the shade and in the in air conditioning, places and whatnot. It's hard, and I get it. Like, it's super fucking frustrating, and I really empathize with the black community because they've been shafted for a long fucking time. But the solution to that is not going to be by you kicking out all the immigrants in the country. That is it's a psyop. It's a bullshit to distract you from the real issues.
Los Angeles or
in California in total?
I don't know. I don't know much about California.
It's under 7% now. He doesn't have enough people that need jobs in California for you to make that statement toward Texas.
It's not even that
Texas,
jobs.
more black people.
Well, even in Texas, I mean, I don't know. Maybe that is the case. Maybe it's not. I don't know. I'm not from Texas, but yeah, I mean, I have to wonder: are there all these black Americans who are looking to compete with immigrants for these cherry picking jobs in the middle of the fucking desert sun in Texas? I doubt that that's the case. I think it's just an excuse.
Stay in Texas. More foundational white Americans stay in Texas.
Let's just talk holistically. There are 7 million
jobs.
But
holistically doesn't work for everyone.
Well, no, but I'm talking globally about the economy. There are 7 million jobs that are unfilled in this country. We have more jobs than we do workers in America right now. And these are, as you know, some of the toughest jobs, right? Picking our fruit, taking care of our children and our elders, paving our highways. These are jobs that are difficult, and the research shows that undocumented immigrants are really just competing against other recent immigrants. They're not competing with native-born Americans who, in many cases, whether it's that avocado farm or whether it's other industries across the country, native-born Americans will not sign up to mow our lawns. And so if we go after these immigrants, we're not just hurting them and their families and their ability to live the American dream, we're hurting the entire economy. We're hurting ourselves. And then I'll go one step further. Those immigrants go on oftentimes to create jobs. Half of all Fortune 500 CEOs are immigrants. A quarter of all entrepreneurs are immigrants. The research shows that immigrants and their children have a higher economic mobility rate than native-born Americans. So these are strivers. They're dreamers. They're doers. Unlike what some politicians say, in the vast majority of cases, these countries are sending their best, and they do make us stronger and richer through their military service and through doing the jobs that need to be done in this economy.
All right, pause. That's time. Please return to your seat.
Great job, Terrence. Nice to meet you. My next claim is that your vote matters in 2026. Hi, what's your name?
Michaela.
Michaela.
Nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you. Since this is a new claim, let me just kind of tell you what I'm thinking, and then I would love to open this up.
Yeah, of course.
When I first ran for office, I was a 28-year-old public school teacher, and I was running in a Republican district as a Democrat. And so I had to knock on literally every door in order to get elected. And I was trying to talk to my fellow young people. I'm a millennial. I was also trying to talk to Gen Z. And I kept hearing this refrain, I'm not interested in politics. And at some point, I was just honest with them. I said, you may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. You may not care about politics, but your boss at work cares about politics. Your landlord cares about politics. Your insurance company cares about politics. And until you care about politics, they're going to keep using the political system to screw you over. Barbara Jordan, a great Texan, had this quote where she said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so the argument I'm making with this claim is if young people in particular aren't at the table in this election, we will continue to be on the menu in 2020.
Hello? Oh my god. I did it again. Shit, I don't even know. I might have missed a lot of dialogue earlier. That's okay, we're just gonna move on. But this is so true. I mean, there's a lot of young people who complain about the state of politics. complain about how the United States is turning out, but then they don't vote. And you know, when you don't vote, other people are going to vote in your stead, and the ones who do vote are going to win by default, right? You are giving it up for free. That came out weird, but you know what I mean.
27.
Okay, so I agree that the younger generations are essentially our future.
Yeah.
I'm completely like undecided.
Yeah.
I have no idea
Yeah.
which route I want to go,
Okay.
specifically because like I am a younger generation that wasn't necessarily educated on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't entirely.
That is a surprisingly honest and humble thing for her to admit. I'm quite impressed, honestly. That's pretty awesome. I appreciate that. In politics, so much, people are unwilling to say, I don't know, or I was not educated on this, or that's awesome.
Really feel like I strongly just don't feel that like my voice matters. I'm a content creator myself. There on election day, I made a joke like, oh my god, I didn't even realize it was election day. And my whole fan base was like, your vote matters, like you were supposed to use that vote. But for someone who's undecided, if I'm not confident in an answer, like why would my voice matter? You know what I mean?
I hear that. And your first point about how we don't teach young people about the system of government and how to vote and what it means, we're doing them a disservice, and we are actively disenfranchising them by not empowering them with that knowledge. In my first term in the legislature, I actually got a bipartisan bill through the State House. It ended up dying in the State Senate for comprehensive civics education. It's been a long time since we've had real civics education in this country that teach young.
I think what we should have, and I don't know if this would be like a 2-year thing or maybe a 1-year thing, is like a combination home economics / civics, or kind of in much in the same way that when you go through school, it's like you have English, and then you're always going to have like the next semester or the next year like English 2 and then English 3, something like. It's a part of civics. Part of home economics is civics, right? So it's kind of under that same umbrella. Maybe it'd all be part of like a social science curriculum where it doesn't have to be your entire schooling, but maybe in high school, maybe it starts in middle school, but you do want to cover like basic ideas and concepts in social science. I don't think that needs to be more than a year, maybe 1 semester, but you also want to teach like basic skills of maintaining a home, basic personal finance, basic home repairs, basic car maintenance, stuff like that. Maybe some basics about nutrition and eating healthy, and basics about, working out, basics about, maybe this isn't super necessary, maybe it's just me, but like some basics about like growing plants. And then also, your traditional civics, talking about the 3 branches of government, the structure of our government, voting, the political compass, the Overton window, media literacy, things of that nature. Yeah.
People how to take ownership of the democratic process. And I think that's absolutely necessary if we're going to give people the tools and the resources to remake this broken political system in their own image. Because politics is corrupt. I will tell you that as someone who's in politics.
Yeah.
The system is corrupt from top to bottom. The only way that's going to change is if people like you, people around the circle, people all over the state decide to take that power back and transform this broken system. So I'm not disagreeing that it's rigged. I'm not disagreeing that it's stacked. That's all true. I think where we may be disagreeing is that we're powerless to change it. I don't believe that. I have faith, maybe not evidence.
I don't even think she said that, but
it's
worth
all of our
saying,
divisions that
yeah.
are put in place by billionaires. When we do that,
It's motivational.
we can change this country for the better. It
All
may
right,
not go
pause.
fast, but it'll happen.
You've been voted out. Please return to your
Thank
seat.
you. Nice
Great
to
job.
meet you.
Yeah, thank you. Hey.
All right, I'm going to come at you hard on this.
Okay.
3 points.
Yeah.
One is it's contradictory to what you said earlier. You said millionaires and billionaires control it. They're all
Who
bad
is
guys.
it?
We hate them.
Oh, this guy.
We know how that happens, right? Advertisements. And so, one, that's contradictory. You're saying
What's
it
contradictory?
matters. You're also saying it doesn't matter because of millionaires and billionaires. 2, politicians
What?
contribute.
I don't understand what he's saying.
Politicians are half of the problem. things like we put R&D on the voting card. Why? If you don't know who you're voting for, why would we put that there? If you're too uneducated and stupid, why?
Because who gets to decide that, right? That's the issue, is that if you leave it up to someone to decide, then the elites get to decide, and then the politics just becomes a system that is preferential towards the people who are already established at the detriment of the people who are not established. That's why. Because I don't disagree, right? Democracy, the flaw of it is that there's a lot of people who are stupid and don't know anything, and I'm uncomfortable with taking away their right to vote. Maybe it should be more of like a cultural shift where we encourage people, if you are going to vote, try to be responsible with your vote, try to educate yourself on the issue. If you don't really know, then maybe pass on that issue. You don't have to vote for everything that's on your ballot.
Why are we giving you the worst shortcut ever? And that's a political system. And then we do things like get out and vote. I'll tell you this, at a bar, and I see this giant sign over the stage in a bar, get out and vote. That's idiotic, because the only person that's going to influence is the person who said, I'm not going to vote, but you know what? I was at a bar and drinking, I saw a sign. I'm going to be an informed, educated voter. No, we don't want those people voting. And then lastly, honestly, James, I don't think you're going to do anything. We've heard it before, drain the swamp, eat the rich, until they get voted, and then they're just rich people swimming in the swamp. What are you going to actually do that changes that system that you're talking about?
Yeah, well, one, I agree you shouldn't drink and vote. You got to keep those two things separate.
We'd probably get better voters, honestly.
Two, you're not going to hear me defend this two-party system. I actually think it's corrosive in our politics. It's hard to break out of, but I would be very interested in supporting policies that allow for multiple parties. Because a lot of other countries
ranked choice
have
voting,
way more than two
please.
parties.
Give
And
it to me.
I think it allows for more collaboration, more interests to be represented, more issues to be heard. So I'm very dissatisfied with the two-party system. Big money is powerful, don't get me wrong, but it is nothing compared to people power. We may not have the money, but we have the majority.
What are you going to do? How are you
So
going
let's
to
talk about that one. Let me be very honest with you.
Specific. I don't want the general. I want specific.
Let me
What's
be
the
honest
policy?
with you. Let me be honest with you. I alone am not going to change this. I know there are some politicians who say I alone can fix it. I'm not one of them. Because I don't want to promise
Ooh,
you
that's a
something
nice
I
jab
can't
at
deliver.
Donald Trump, but it's true, right?
My goal with this campaign is to be a catalyst for people all over the state to come together and organize so that we can start, again, not finish, but start our way toward a more representative form of government. So specifically, we talked earlier about comprehensive immigration reform. I think we also need comprehensive political reform. I hope my first vote, if I'm elected as U.S. Senator, would be the For the People Act, which is something that's already been introduced. I'm sure it'll change the details of it. But a few things that it does is it gets big money out of politics. It ends Citizens United, which may be the most disastrous policy for our democracy in modern American history. And then it goes further and it bans things like gerrymandering, because gerrymandering is when politicians redraw political lines to benefit themselves. Democrats do it and Republicans do it. Not always the same amount, but they both do it. Because
I'm
it's
glad
not
you
an
put that.
issue
I was
of
almost
party,
triggered.
it's an
Almost.
issue of power. People in
But
power.
here's the thing, right? When I say I was almost triggered, I wasn't actually going to comment on it, because sometimes liberals, leftists, they'll get reactionary, and not reactionary in a political sense, but like reactive, in the sense that you hear something that's wrong and you immediately seize upon it. You have to focus the rhetoric. You have to be focused. What is the main point? Don't get lost on little side tangents where it may not be the main point. Sure, it may be something that you'd like to talk about, maybe something that you have an issue with, but it might distract from the main topic, the main issue, and it may not be worth, going down that route, going off on a tangent over it.
Or want to stay in power. That's the most predictable thing in history. I've actually been a victim of this. I told you I first ran as a Democrat in a Republican seat. And I won that seat because I brought people together across partisan divides. And then my Republican colleagues in the legislature in 2020 decided to draw me out of that district. They basically broke my district in half so that they could guarantee the outcome they wanted. Thankfully, I survived because I was able to move a couple of miles down the road and run in the district I grew up in. But I saw firsthand how gerrymandering, how this corrupt redistricting process silences the voices of the people. Again, the deck is stacked.
I need specifics. Like I would love for you, if you don't have
For
it,
the People Act,
before you get my vote, I need a specific plan. Publish it on your website and says this is the law. This is how we're covering unintended consequences. Because I hope you're right. I've heard it all before. And
I don't know if I trust that this voter is actually undecided. I feel like he's just here to kind of try to shit on and like get some gotchas on Talarico. Maybe he is honest, but if he is honest, then the issue is like you're never gonna find a politician that's gonna be able to give you the detailed breakdown at every single policy. That's like just not really a fair standard, because again, like the details of these things have to be ironed out with a lot of deliberation, a lot of like hearings, a lot of consulting experts, a lot of back and forth. It's fair to ask for kind of like the general vision of what you're going for, and even like to some degree of detail, but you can't ask for like a policy breakdown that looks like an actual law. Like an actual law is going to be multiple pages of like, you know, in the event of this, given this, under option A because of A, follow this one, and in the event of this, and then this part here, and it's like it's super, super specific. It takes a long time to work that out. You're not going to get that realistically. So if you're really undecided because of it, because that's your issue, then there's no one that you can vote for. And I just don't believe that he's gonna not vote at all. I don't believe that. So it just kind of feels like he's trying to apply a standard to Talarico that is just not really a fair standard for a politician on the campaign trail to satisfy. And just kind of using it more as a gotcha.
I feel like I've been hearing it for 20 years.
Well, and I would say I also feel tempted by hopelessness. I really do. There are some days when I'm on the floor of the Texas House and I'm fighting for a policy I believe in on healthcare, on education, on housing, on stopping fentanyl overdoses, and I lose that fight.
I'm not hopeless, I'm disengaged.
I'm just telling you how I feel sometimes, and it's hopeless. Because I'll walk off the floor.
If you're disengaged, why are you disengaged, right? I feel like you can't be disengaged without being hopeless. Like those two things go hand in hand.
After that long fight when I've lost?
Like in the sense that, because I know it carries like a certain connotation, what I mean by that is, if you are disengaged, it's because you don't think that there's any hope out of any of the candidates or parties. So by definition, you are kind of hopeless. Not like, oh, you're crying in a corner or anything, but like you're apathetic for a reason.
I'll walk out to my truck, I'll drive home, and I'll just feel totally and utterly defeated. And so I can't imagine how someone on the outside must feel when they look at this political system. The only thing I'm trying to convince you of, the only way out of it, is through you and through the people around the circle, not me. It's actually not through politicians. Politicians will not save us. It will be the people of this state and this country that save us, because it's the only thing that ever has.
All right, pause. You've been voted out. Please return
Thanks.
to your
Good
seat.
job. Likewise.
So he's in the middle of the keyboard. We got 5, 4, 3,
So
2.
I disagree in the fact that my vote matters because not only things that I've historically seen, but let's just talk about the last, let's just say the 4 years.
Yeah.
While I was in law school, I had an internship Capitol Hill.
Oh, okay.
And I actually at the time, you know, Democrat because I was going with my family, how I was raised, but there were a lot of things that I saw. It was actually something that you had touched on earlier about the corporations, their involvement, them paying money to different
Then, okay, congratulations, then don't vote. And then everybody else will vote, and then you won't get, they'll get people in office and you won't. And then congratulations, like, yeah, you're not getting everything in the world that you fucking want. It's not happening overnight, but like, yeah, with that mentality, nothing gets done. I don't like, it annoys me in general when there's a mentality of like, I agree with talking about systemic issues, okay? But if you use that as an excuse to not try anything, then like, yeah, you're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Like, if you're not even going to try, then just shut the fuck up and go sit in a corner and just like don't participate, because you're a waste of time, and like there's no point. Like, there's no point to anything you're saying or bringing up or anything. Like, what do you want to do then? Do you want to launch a violent revolution? What is your solution then at that point? Nothing changes the way you want it to because not enough of the people that agree with you vote. That's it. That's the bottom line.
politicians, and it was on both sides.
Yeah.
And I realized that they all laid in the same bed. There is no different. I changed. I went, when I got back to Texas, I took that off, and I'm like, put me down as an undecided or independent voter.
Yeah.
Like, you are very charismatic. I like a lot of the things that you said. However, I'm still the how And how is it going to be done?
1, 2, 3,
so the
4, 5,
gerrymandering,
6,
obviously,
7,
that's been an
8.
issue.
There's 8
So if
across.
you have politicians involved in that,
I
pretty
wanna
much
go
you're
3.
already saying that my vote doesn't matter, that it's about what the politician wants or the particular party.
There are certain politicians where this is true, where it's just about what they want and they manipulate the voters to get into power. I would argue that that's primarily concentrated in the Republican Party, but I think generally speaking, politicians do represent their constituencies decently well. It's just that the constituencies that do vote may not be the same constituency that you are. And so you're losing out to these people who do vote. And also, I mean, again, you're not the only person voting. You're voting, and there are other people in society that are also voting, and so it has to be kind of somewhere between all these different groups. It's kind of balancing out between all these different groups. So you're not going to get 100% of what you want. You're not going to get it right away, but through consistency is how you get there.
Also, something else that I don't.
That's why boomers. That's why the politics represent boomers so well at the detriment of everyone else, because boomers show up every single fucking election and they vote, and everybody else has these excuses for why they can't vote or why they didn't vote or why they don't feel like they should vote. Like, okay, cool. Then you're not gonna then you can just keep fucking complaining and nothing's ever gonna get done the way that you want it to. I'm glad I'm not Talarico, because Talarico needs to convince these people to vote. I don't have to. I can just criticize them. But yeah, it's annoying. It's a waste of my fucking time. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear this cynical fucking nothing is good, nothing can ever be done. Like, oh, okay, congratulations. What do you want me to do about that?
Like that the Democrats do, or even really on both sides. You don't make sure that the communities are informed of what you've done or what you're going to do. Even down to us just voting for the propositions. The language was written in a way to where people didn't understand it. Also, again, both parties weren't out there trying to inform the people to make sure that they understood what each proposition was saying. And so to me, it just seems like it's pretty much all controlled, and it's not about what I want. It's not about the needs of the people, and that it's already a fixed race and it's already decided. So my thing is, what are you going to do to not only inform the voters, but what are you going to do to even, because we've talked a lot about the system. You know, but this is 100 years of a system that's not looking like it's going to be shaken.
All right, pause. You've been voted out. Please return.
Then don't vote and just be apathetic.
That's so much I wanted to say.
And I mean, by the way, it's not already decided. The entire reason that we are in the place that we are right now, where the Supreme Court is overwhelmingly like a MAGA Supreme Court, where the Congress is made up of predominantly like Republicans, it's favorable to Republicans because they gerrymander. All of that was a decades-long project. They didn't get what they wanted right away. They worked on it for decades. They moved the needle inch by inch for fucking decades. And all you guys have is excuses why you can't vote or why you shouldn't vote and why the thing... It's not stacked against you. The reality is that the people who voted are the ones who get represented the most. That is what you're looking at. And part of that is because their demographics are larger than yours, right? If you're part of the black population, you're 13% of the population, and you're concentrated in different parts of the country, so you're not represented to the same degree that the white population is. True, that is true, right? But if you don't vote, then your representation is 0 fucking percent.
Hi.
How's it going?
James, great name.
Yeah, no, right? Both of our parents had good naming conventions.
That's right, yeah.
Why do I feel like my vote doesn't matter? Because as somebody who is a working class, attached to the queer community, and a non-Christian, there is nobody in our legislature that speaks to the things that I care about. Christian policy typically works kind of in the same vein of my belief system, but there are certain ways that it doesn't. As far as like the queer community, especially here in Texas, who's speaking out for them? Who's talking about them? Besides, you know, trans people are ruining sports, which, not gonna get into that. The final, and to me, what feels like the biggest crux of all of this is no matter how informed I am, no matter how much I research my stuff, all of us in this room research everything, that's 25 of us. Means 25 people out of, let's say, just this block, where we're at right now. There's 500 people in this block. 25 people are informed, 475 probably aren't. And they're more than likely going to vote with the gerrymandered people who are already in power. So when you say that my vote matters, all of my stuff, plus the fact of that I've been gerrymandered into hell, why?
So you are gerrymandered because the population who did vote voted for politicians to gerrymander. You have to consistently vote. You can't sit it out. If you sit it out, the other voters will vote and they will vote against you. Okay? You sit out, you're only going to make the matters worse for yourself. You are in a rut right now. I agree with you. The way you get out of that rut is not by deciding that you're not going to play the game and let the other people decide for you. We've already been doing that to a certain degree, and they decided and they gerrymandered the fuck out of the system against your will. You want to claw your way out of that rut, you're going to have to claw your way out of that fucking rut, and it's going to start with, at the very fucking least, go out and vote. Going out and voting is maybe an hour out of your day twice a year. You know, if you're voting in the primaries, I don't know, what is it, maybe 4 times a year? And, like, shit, maybe, at the very least, if you can't even do the primaries, at least do the general elections. I guess it's more like twice a year. Or it's not every year, it's every 2 years. Whatever it is, right? But the point is, we're not asking you to go vote every 2 fucking hours. We're not asking you to vote every week. You have 1 day to vote. That's 1 day, and you're only spending a few hours of your time to do so. Go do that. And then if you want to do all this rest of the activism shit, if you want to, like, the other stuff that actually really helps to kind of push the needle, actually getting involved, actually making your voice known on social media where the debate is happening, right, in the public sphere, talking to your coworkers about things, advocating for yourself in those ways, right? Those are the other things that you could do the rest of the 365 days of the year. Doing the vote is the minimum fucking thing that you can do. It's not that hard. It doesn't take that much time out of your life. You're acting like people are asking you for this massive burden. It's the smallest thing that you can do to get involved. And if you can't even do that, then I don't even think you should complain. If you can't even show up to fucking vote, then I don't want to hear you bitch and complain. You didn't even do the bare fucking minimum. You didn't even try.
Based on my personal experience, when I was running for the legislature 8 years ago, I was running in a gerrymandered district that was built to vote for Republicans, and I was running as a Democrat. The deck was stacked against me. The deck was stacked against a lot of people in my community. Yeah. But we organized. We didn't just vote. Voting is the bare minimum in a democracy.
What did I say?
We organized. We went block by block. We talked voter to voter. And we ended up winning that district with 51% of the vote. I say that number because that means it was just a handful of votes. That's right. It's right. And not every election is going to be decided by a handful of votes. I want to be honest about that.
Yeah.
But some elections that are very consequential will be decided by a handful of votes. And by getting me elected to that position, I have fought for LGBTQ people in this state. I have fought for their dignity. I have fought for their equality. And I will always do so. And I may not always win every fight, but I am there as a voice because people believe their votes matter. So I hear that you're disheartened. Believe me, it's even more disheartening when you're in the system.
Oh, I bet.
But I have seen glimmers of hope, and a little bit of hope is a dangerous thing, because Raphael Warnock, senator from Georgia, has this thing that he says. He says a vote is like a prayer for a better world. You may not always see those prayers realized in your lifetime. Yeah. But having faith, and not necessarily religious faith, but faith in this American experiment, that faith means that your hope is that your sunset is someone else's.
Also, I mean, gay marriage was unheard of in our country for like 200 and something years. To pretend like in the gay community is not a majority of the population. It's never been, and it's even now it's not. Gay people by themselves do not have the numbers to make gay marriage a reality. Well, I guess that came about because of the Supreme Court. I just owned myself there. Try to think of another example. I mean, we can go a little bit further back. We can look at like the Civil Rights era. If you look at the civil rights era, we had, desegregation, we had integration of schools, we had the Civil Rights Act that came from the legislators that people voted into office, right? Those things happened, and it took, 100 years or more to get to that point. But it did happen, and it happened because people voted for politicians who reflected their values, because the public expressed its will, because the public was influential enough, because they went out there and they protested and everything. It does happen. That progress does happen. This modern generation is convinced that everything can only go backwards because they've lived since 2015 with things going backwards. But if you lived before 2015, you know that reaction, that strong MAGA right-wing reaction that they had, was because they were losing the culture war. Because liberalism, if you look at the long history of the United States, liberalism has been the prevailing ideology that has marched forward, that has won the day. There has been little setbacks over time, but we have pushed things forward the entire time. That is the history of the United States. We would not have pushed those things forward through the history of the United States. Everybody decided we can't do anything. Our votes doesn't matter. We don't have it right now. Things are never going to change. You push it forward increment by increment. It sucks that you can't get it all right now, but that is the reality of the situation. But we will never push forward. We will never advance with the mentality that you can't. You have to try. You have to make the effort. You have to make your voices known. You have to vote.
Dawn, for sure. Progress is a relay race, and we pass it on to the next generation.
Yes.
Please return to your
Great job.
seat.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, shit, for fuck's sake. The right to vote. The right to vote at the founding of the country only applied to land-owning white males, not even all white males. Then it expanded to white males. Then it expanded to black males as well, after emancipation and everything. Then it expanded to women, and expanded to now everybody who is above the age of 18 has the right to vote. People fought and died. They marched for it. They organized for it. They consistently showed up to vote for it until those things became things. And now you have those rights and you take them for granted and you don't even want to exercise them.
Hey, how are you? Ashton, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I won't try to get too long-winded so I can stay here a lot longer. But speaking from somebody to kind of walk through this thing, and I'll walk through it pretty quick. Speaking from somebody who historically has voted Democrat, I think the reason why I've transitioned to kind of that undecided space is a lot of people have spoken on it today. Being as African American living in this world, we've talked about the system in this.
I get this. The Democrats haven't stood up for you in the way that you wanted to. The Democrats haven't succeeded in the policy that you wanted to. But that is because the Democratic voting skews younger. They're not consistent voters. The way our system now is kind of like gerrymandered favors those rural areas. But those rural areas, those states got gerrymandered because, again, Republican voters showed up to vote for politicians who would gerrymander. Where was I going with it? The Democratic Party cannot possibly pass the policy that you want to, nor can they feel confident that they can advocate for the policy that you want if you do not show up to vote to support them. Think about it this way. If you are someone who, let's say, wants universal health care, but you do not show up to vote, why would the Democratic, if you don't show up to vote in election after election after election, if you are not a reliable voter, why would the Democratic Party appeal to your vote? They don't think that you're going to show up to support them. They, after a while, decide to themselves, you know what? We can't waste our time and energy and rhetoric and in money and everything chasing after these voters who don't vote. We need to focus on the voters who do vote. And so the voters who do vote, they're the ones who the Democratic Party now starts shifting their policy agenda and their rhetoric toward. When you don't show up to vote in the elections, that signals to the party that they can't rely on your vote, and therefore they can't waste their time and energy appealing to you. They need to shift that focus to another group of voters who do vote. And that's why the Democratic Party has shifted more moderate over the past couple of years, because believe it or not, in the 2010s, they were shifting in a more progressive generation. It was like consistently going in a more progressive direction. But they started shifting moderate. Why? Because the voting public, the voters who did vote, who showed up, who shifted the election, started shifting the election towards what? Immigration issues, towards anti-woke policies, towards like this MAGA conservative movement, right? Meanwhile, the left-wing voters and the young voters didn't show up to vote, and they started withholding their vote because the party was not left-wing enough for them. And it becomes it becomes a vicious cycle. It becomes a self-reinforcing, what's the term? What's the term? You know what I mean? It becomes a vicious cycle of you do not show up to vote, so you are not represented in government. The politicians who are running don't think they can rely on you to vote, so they shift to the voters who do vote, which means that those same politicians are not supporting the policy that you want to see, so then you don't show up to vote. So those politicians don't think that they can have your vote, so they shift their focus to voters who will vote, which means that you feel like you're not represented by the party. You understand? I'm being redundant here because what I'm describing is a vicious circle. You have to break that cycle, and the way that you break that cycle is by showing up to vote. A lot of left-wing voters don't show up in the primaries, and then come the general election time, they're disappointed because the candidates are not progressive enough for them. Well, you didn't show up in the fucking primary. Why the fuck would the candidates who won the primary reflect your views when the voters who did show up in the primaries are more of those moderate, liberal, older voters? You have to show up in the primaries. I'm sorry, but you want something for nothing. You have to show up in the process. You have to engage in the process. You have to try to make the process work for you. If you don't do that, then you have no room to fucking complain.
This entire thing. We can talk about billionaires and everything, but a lot of it is based in white supremacy. So as an African-American man, if you think about the history of this country and how African-Americans have been treated as a whole, dating back to slavery and Jim Crow and black codes and the crack epidemic, everything.
Sure.
You have to understand as to why you can kind of get to a point where you lose hope. Because in a sense, you have a country who continuously makes it effort to never look at us as far as its people. If we're being honest.
And I don't disagree with you there, right? But again, if you're not showing up to vote for the Democratic Party, then the Democratic Party cannot rely on you, and they have to chase after other voters, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're not showing up to vote for those Democratic politicians who are more favorable to your, more empathetic to your concerns, they are not in office, and therefore there is just no way for that policy to get passed. So yes, it is hard. Yes, it is an uphill battle. The point that I'm making is that if you don't show up, if you don't try to engage, if you don't make an effort, you are ensuring that your interests fail. You are making sure that they fail. There is a chance, there is a possibility, there is an avenue. It's hard, it's grueling, it takes a long time. You have to be consistent. There is an avenue for getting that policy pushed forward, push that ball forward, if you engage with the process. If you do not engage with the process, not only do you not have a chance, you don't have a chance. The chance doesn't exist. What would you rather have? Would you rather have a 30% chance, or would you have a chance of 0? It's a simple proposition. You choose the option that you have. You choose the best option available to you.
Honest, because a lot of it is based on white supremacy. A lot of it is based in the aspect of we are a marginalized group that they do not even think about. So in terms of you being a white Christian male, and we're living in this white nationalist, Christian nationalist world currently right now, how can someone like you speak to me as an African male and an African American just in general and say, hey, like, your vote does matter, when historically it never has?
Here's what I'll tell you. They wouldn't be trying so hard to stop you from voting.
This is a really good answer.
Stopping young people across the board of all races from voting if your vote didn't matter.
This is a really good way of framing it.
Proof
Probably better than the way I was trying to frame it.
Tremendous power, especially when it's joined with thousands and millions of other people's
it needs to be a coalition.
But
That's
right.
the only way it happens, because you just do not have the numbers on your own. None of us do.
especially here in Texas. This is one of the hardest places to vote in the entire country.
Yeah.
All of that is by design. It's so that the people who are currently in power can stay in power and they never have to face accountability. I also want to just thank you for questioning your loyalty to any party. I'm a proud Democrat, but I've said before, I already have a religion and I already have a sports team. Like, I have no problem sharing hard truths in my party, and I don't think you should feel that you owe loyalty to any party.
No.
You have a loyalty to yourself and your community and your family, and if one party is not representing you, or if one party is taking you for granted, then you have a right to push back against them.
For sure. And I think the biggest thing as far as with Democrats specifically is, I spoke with someone earlier about this. I think Republicans kind of put it in your face straight up. Hey, I don't like you, and it is what it is.
I guess.
And I think that with Democrats, as funny as it is, I think with Democrats, they kind of speak in a sense of, hey, if I come to you and say, hey, you know, we are a very marginalized group. We are dealing with over-policing. We're dealing with police brutality. It's like, hey, I empathize with you, but then they go home about their day.
Well, let me tell you, let me give you an example on that. I told you I was elected with 51% of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
So black voters were the reason that I was able to get elected to the state legislature. I had a constituent, his name was Javier Ambler. He was a father who was killed by the police for not dimming his brights. He was pulled over. He told them he had a heart condition. They tased him so many times that he died right in front of them. The whole thing was filmed for a reality TV show called Live PD. It's kind of like Cops. The research shows that those reality TV policing programs encourage more violent behavior from police officers toward constituents. Oftentimes it's black and brown constituents that are getting the most hurt. I worked with Javier's family to pass Javier Ambler's law, which bans reality TV policing in the state of Texas. It's not enough. We have to do so much more. But to me, that's one example of when you elect someone who does have the community's interest at heart, and you continue to work with them. Again, just voting and walking away, it's not going to do it.
It's not.
But if you vote for someone and you hold them accountable, which I hope you hold me accountable if I'm elected as your senator, progress is possible.
Yeah, and I think, and to the story of the police brutality, because I had a little brother who passed away, who was killed by a police officer. So that is something that I'm also very passionate about, because it's something that hit very home for me. So when we speak about things such as defunding the police or over-policing in our communities, that adds to another piece of why it is very difficult to necessarily, if I'm being very frank, to believe any BS that Democrats are saying, because I'm living in a reality. Yeah, we can talk about things from a grand scheme, from a top level, but when you're speaking about as an African American walking everyday life, where
I mean, if you want to be realistic, if you're against bullshit, the realistic thing here is that the blame that people give to the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party has issues. I talk about it all the time. They're shitty with their fucking rhetoric, really fucking shitty with the rhetoric, really shitty with making, the case to the American people and stuff. But this thing that people do on the left and liberals do sometimes, where it's just, oh, everything's bad because the Democratic Party's, it's easy to just blame the Democratic Party. If you want to cut through the bullshit that people tell themselves is that everything that the Democrats aren't doing is because the Democrats are, like, I don't know, out to get you, they're full of shit, they're, whatever. Our government just does not work that way. You cannot expect that you vote in politicians and then they're just magically going to make it happen. Again, the Congress has 535 members. In order for legislation to pass the House and the Senate, you have to have a majority of those members. And oftentimes, if it's going to be filibustered by the Republican Party, you're going to need a supermajority. And so if that's the case, if the Democrats don't have those majorities, to blame them for it is you bullshitting yourself. It's not real. It's not true. It doesn't work that way. It's a comforting lie that you tell yourself that you just want someone to blame, and you blame the Democratic Party because you think that they're miracle workers. If you put a Democratic president in office, I'm sorry, but the president does not write legislation. The president himself cannot change these things, okay? The president is one step in that whole process. Now, you want that step in that process because if the legislation passes the House and the Senate, it's gonna be you're gonna need it to be signed by the president. So you want that president there. But just getting that president in office is not gonna change the whole thing. And simply blaming the president, saying, hey, we put Obama in office, he promised hope and change, and we didn't get everything that we wanted. The president literally just does not have the power for that. It doesn't work that way. He He did what he could do within his power, which is what you want. That's all you can ask for. But you need to try to capture both the House, the Senate, the presidency, and the Supreme Court. And do not tell me that that's too much to ask, because Republicans are playing that game and they're winning because they did not treat it like it was too much to ask. They went out, they voted, they strategized it over a decade's time. If it's hard for us, then it's hard for them. But if you decide that you sit out and you don't try, then it's easy for them. Don't make it easy for them to capture all three chambers of government like we have right now. Go out and make it. It's a battle. It's a competition between us and the Republican Party. And if you do not show up to that battle, you lose by default.
Where you're dealing with things that are just based in a system that never was meant to work for me. Yep. It's kind of hard to live, to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm a man of faith too, and I do believe that there is a belief that you have to, have hope for something, for sure. But I think that sometimes, there is hard to kind of still live in that hope when the everyday world that's around you does not care about you.
And Ashton, do not believe anything I say, believe what I've done.
For sure.
And I think that's going to be the best predictor. What was your brother's name?
His name is Isaiah.
Well, I think that if we do this right, if we have a mass movement of working people of all races in this state and across the country, I think we can win this next election and actually move the country forward for Isaiah and for all the people that we've lost because the system is so thoroughly broken. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate you. My final claim is that the biggest divide in our politics is not left versus right, it's top versus bottom. Hi. What's your name? Krista. Spending 8 years in the middle of this broken political system, I've come to realize that the biggest divide is between the billionaires who run this political system, who run this economy, who increasingly run this whole country, versus the rest of us, whether we're Democrats or Republicans, progressives or conservatives. And I've seen how those billionaires pit us against each other with their algorithms, with their cable news networks. They're trying to divide us by party, by race, by gender, by religion, so we don't notice that they're picking our pockets. They're closing our schools and gutting our health care, raising taxes on all of us while they cut taxes for themselves. So what I'm trying to do is bring us all
takes so much time, and I fucked it up.
These divisions, so we can take power away from them and bring it back into our communities.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from on that. And I agree that lobbying does play a big role in some of our representatives. The more funding they get, the more they have to advertise for, their position that they want. But where I disagree on that is I believe that how can I say this? I believe that economics, the top versus the bottom, accounts for economic inequity. Mm-hmm. But I believe ideology is where the polarization comes in. So you're a man of faith, correct?
Yeah.
So
try to be.
You are, definitely. So wouldn't you say that your faith drives who you are as a person and your beliefs?
Absolutely. And I agree that political polarization is a problem. What I'm trying to get us to realize is how these systems that we're in, a broken political system, a broken media system, a broken social media system, how that exacerbates ideological differences.
That's a good way of putting it.
Of course, we're all very different people. We're going to have different opinions. But these algorithms...
Because there's truth to what you're saying, but I mean also,
they fan the flames of those disagreements, and that's why we have such polarized politics, in my opinion.
So you think it's like an echo chamber, is that what you're stating?
I think that these billionaires, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Rupert Murdoch, the people who increasingly own traditional media and new social media, they have a vested interest in all of us being divided. Because if we recognize that we are far more alike than we are different, if we realize that we have far more in common, we're going to take power back from them and we're going to bring it back into our communities.
So where I would disagree on that is there's so many economic elites. So let's just give an example. The owners of Ben and Jerry, they spend so much time on, climate change, trying to draw that back. They spend a lot of time on putting their time into charity. Let's just say putting it towards charity for those who are less fortunate. But we have the polar opposite, right? Let's just say the owner of Chick-fil-A, they spend a lot of their time donating to more conservative. So I would say that it's not just the elite. I believe it goes back to their ideology, because we see people who are multimillionaires and they're still donating to the left. They're still donating to the right. Wouldn't you agree?
I totally agree. What I'm trying to propose is that we limit the influence of those very, very wealthy people, whether they're on the left or the right, in our political system. They can have their own opinions, there's nothing more American than having your own opinions. They shouldn't have an outsized influence on our political system. They shouldn't be able to buy politicians by the dozen. I'll just give you one example. Here in Texas, there are 2 billionaires in West Texas, Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilks. They basically run our state government. I bet most Texans don't even know their names, but every member of the state Senate has taken their money. A majority of the members of the state House have taken their money. And for some of these legislators, a majority of their entire campaign contributions come from just these 2 billionaires.
Okay.
And they use that influence, they use their wealth to shift our state into a far right direction. The most extreme abortion ban in the country, the most insane gun laws in the country. All of that is because these 2 billionaires have remade our state government in their own image. I'm trying to stop them from doing that. They can have their own opinions. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to stop that. I'm trying to prevent the top 1%, these billionaire mega donors, from being able to dictate public policy in this state and in this country.
So when we have the issue of, let's just say, another multimillionaire in Texas is using it for policies that you agree with, are you going to do that on both sides, or are you going to just do it on a certain side? How are you going to combat that?
I'm going to limit the influence of billionaires on both sides of the aisle,
But
whether
how?
it's a Democratic billionaire or a Republican billionaire. I think we've got to ban things like super PACs. I think we've got to even further limit campaign contributions. I think we've got to prevent lawmakers from being able to engage in insider trading and buying and selling these stocks.
Yeah.
I think we need just basic ethics reform, basic transparency, basic accountability, because when our political system works for the uber wealthy, it doesn't work for the rest of us. In fact, it hurts the rest of us. It's why we can't seem to get ahead no matter how hard we work. It's why we can't seem to afford anything, whether it's groceries or whether it's housing or healthcare or childcare. It's because the system is not built to work for us. It's built to work for those billionaires, and it's working very well for them. I think the way we fix that is by reforming our political system so that it can actually be a government of, by, and for the people again.
All right, pause. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your
That was
seat.
great. You were great. Thanks, Krista. Yeah.
Biggest thing that I just heard from this debate you were just talking about is basically billionaires are the problem. I'm curious what, why do you think that they are causing the problems?
So I actually think the system is the problem. The system allows for those billionaires to have an outsized influence in our political conversation, in our economy, and it crowds out the rest of us, those who are working class and middle class Texans. And I want to try to right that imbalance. I think what you've seen in this country for the last 50 years is an economy that used to work for most people transform into one that only works for the uber wealthy. The richest 1% in this country now owns more wealth than the entire middle class. 3 dudes, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Jeff Bezos, now own more wealth than 165 million Americans combined. And they're using that wealth to corrupt our political system. These are not the rich people of old. They're not buying yachts and jets only.
Okay,
They're now
finally
buying
got my
power.
fucking key binding for that
Think about all
shit.
the debates
For the quick
in our
bars
politics.
anyways, so
Our
let's see.
schools are being
Anything else I
defunded,
need to do here?
so those
Movement.
billionaires can get another tax break.
Movement,
Our
I
healthcare
don't.
premiums are about to go up
Space
because
Agent,
those
that's fine.
billionaires want another tax break. And
I
then our
used to have
Social
something for
Security, our
follow target.
Medicare benefits are constantly under threat because those billionaires want yet another tax break.
I
So
forget. How did I do
I'm
this?
advocating
I
that
don't
we
want to use
limit their
the
power
arrows
and we empower working Texans
or
to be able
movement.
to
I want to
fulfill their own
use.
God-given potential.
Interesting. How do you propose?
Oh, I don't.
that
Yeah, I don't
we go
need.
about
Let me
doing
just
that? 'Cause, I
unbind
mean,
this.
the system's
Well,
been here for a long time, and I think the more important question is specifically what system is it? The Texas system? Is it the federal system? Is it there's a lot of systems.
Yes,
Give
there
me
are.
the school system,
Yep.
the tax system. So what specifically are you talking about?
All the above. So you said that we've had it for a long time. It has been a long time. It's been about 50 years. But I just want to remind you and those watching that we did have an economic system in this country that worked for the middle class. In the 1950s, the 1960s, the richest Americans paid a top marginal tax rate of 90%. Now, I don't know if we need a tax rate that high for rich folks, but it should certainly be higher than what it is now. It's about 37% now. And so I want billionaires to pay their fair share. I don't think that
no
George
strafe
Soros
left and right.
should pay
On the
less as a
keyboard
percentage
anyways.
of his income in taxes than his secretary. And that's what we have now. Again, billionaires on the left, billionaires on the right.
Sure. That's okay.
They are getting away scot-free. They are leeching the lifeblood out of this country, out of all the systems that you just
Control-Z.
mentioned. I think the only way we're going to change that is if people like you, people around the circle, people around the state decide to come together across all of these divides, recognize that we have a lot more in common than the billionaires want us to think, and take power back for our communities.
Interesting. So I did a little research about this, and the top 5% of earners in America make about $260,000 a year. They make up for about 60% of the total federal income tax. So that's not billionaires, right?
Yeah.
So that's people who are getting by. They're doing pretty
Right,
good.
yeah.
But my question is, how can
What do we use to bring up the map?
affect billionaires and also still help and not hurt those who are not billionaires?
That's
Maybe
right.
they have a couple million, and they're also providing jobs, because we have a lot of smaller businesses that are within
Don't
the
do this.
5 million
Totally
range.
agree. We don't want to hurt small businesses. We don't want to even hurt
Oh, I
people
did. I'm
who are
buying
middle
that.
class. What we want to do is go
No, I
after
didn't. Okay.
that top 1%.
I don't know if I want that
Actually,
as a
the
button,
top 1% of that 1%. Those billionaires who run this economy and
Maybe
run
use the
this
home
country.
button.
Let's just take an example. The big, ugly bill that passed a few months ago in Washington. It gave $3 trillion in tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans. Just guess what the average billionaire is going to get in terms of tax cuts from that
All
bill.
time's fun.
I'm not sure.
$110,000. Again, our money, our tax dollars are going to those billionaires who don't need it. Guess what we're going to get, regular people, what we're going to get from that bill?
Not sure.
A little over $1,000.
Okay, yeah.
To me, that feels wildly unfair. And it prevents all of us from being able to start that new business, from being able to grow the
So
economy.
yeah, I mean, I think
It
let me
keeps us from being
let me
able to
save
support
that.
our families and make sure that our kids are successful in school and in college and in the workforce. That is how this rigged system prevents us from achieving our potential as a country.
All right, pause.
There we go.
You've been voted out by majority. Please return
Okay,
to your
cool.
seat.
God damn! Now I can finally play the game. You guys ever watch South Park? That one World of Warcraft episode? Where they like spend months training, grinding and stuff,
Straightforward, honest with
all to
you.
like kill one character, and then at the end of it they're like, what do we do now? And they're like, oh, well now we play the game.
Also, my family are
Kind of the irony because they've been playing the game, you know?
in that top 3%, not one. That being said,
Stand by
do
for
I
examination
wish-
and suggested
I'm
products.
sure I'm not the only one out there.
You are fit for
Me and my
duty. Return
family
to your post.
We're
Damn, this voice is
not
loud.
opposed to being the people who say, you know, you tax us more. We're okay with that, because everybody around me, everybody I know, they're going, you know, paycheck to paycheck, single parent. There's not many people we know that are as blessed as us. That said, is it top to bottom that's the problem, or is it left to right? Because when you look at what's going on, I do think that there is a portion of greed that is effective in the billionaires' minds, or the top 1%.
I think there's something to be said for this. I don't think Talarico can really go with this line of, like, he doesn't want to alienate moderate conservatives who will vote for him, so he's not going to say it's the right's fault. But it is, because she's right. There are billionaires who are more liberal-leaning who will try to do things like help climate change or advocate for more redistributive policies, and there are billionaires and millionaires who will be greedy and they just want to vote for their own interests at the detriment of the rest of society, right? It really isn't necessarily that all billionaires or all millionaire class are the problem. It really is kind of like there's an ideological difference between some of these groups. For example, like Bill Gates spent a lot of his life in advocacy and his money supporting kind of more progressive, liberal, left-wing causes. And a similar thing with the owners of Ben and Jerry's, and I think William Buffett is kind of more along that direction. So, and then you have billionaires and millionaires who are just rabid fucking MAGA Trump supporters, rabid fucking Republicans. So it does vary, you know.
But I think there's a lot of left and right when it comes into it, especially when you look at the industry that it plays into, whether it's oil or housing or whatnot. So I disagree that it's not entirely top bottom. I think it's a good portion of it plays into left and right.
So here's what I want to point out. This political discourse in our country, it is controlled by those billionaires increasingly. These four...
I mean, with all that said, right, because I am kind of making the case that not every millionaire and billionaire is the problem. A lot of them do, you know, help contribute to positive policy, they support it, they fund it, they give out charity and whatnot. But with all that said, I do agree with Talarico here in the sense that we should. I do. I'm kind of leaning towards the direction of I do think super PACs are a problem. I would need to look into it a little bit more to really solidify my stance on that. But yeah, I always get these words amiable, amendable, whatever, to that that idea. And I also I've been a proponent of this Andrew Yang concept, which is democracy dollars. So I do agree that, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're, top 1%, whether you're bottom 50%, whatever it is, you should have a voice. You should have your interests represented in the government. Freedom of speech is kind of along that concept, along the lines of everybody in society has the ability to advocate for their own interests. I think what's broken, kind of to his point, is that when the Supreme Court treated money as a form of speech, I understand to a certain degree that sentiment that, what you spend your money on in terms of campaigning, in terms of politics, is an extension of your freedom of expression. But, there is a difference in the respect that, money's a little bit unique in terms of if you have a lot more of it than another person, and you're able to contribute a lot more of it to politics than another person, then your influence in your speech is it's not a level playing field of speech when it comes to money. And so I would like to level that playing field there. And so a great idea that I thought Andrew Yang has is what I want is a combination of Andrew Yang's idea and a combination of this, which is that I think that our elections should be publicly funded, fully publicly funded. And I think that's obviously it's going to cut down on the amount of special interest groups that are bankrolling these politicians, these campaigns, and shifting the conversation. So that's number one. The other thing is I think that I like Andrew Yang's idea. So in conjunction with that, I like Andrew Yang's idea of something called democracy dollars, which is basically come election time, the government would give you as part of this chest of publicly funding for elections, the government would give each voter age person a voucher. Let's say it's $100, maybe it's more than that, whatever the amount is. So everybody has the same amount of money to contribute, financially to the campaigning and discourse of our political system. And I also like that idea because it's even, right? It's a level playing field there. But I also like the idea because it's kind of like, the way our funding right now, we spend so much money on elections. To me, I think to myself sometimes that's money that could have gone to tackling real issues in the real world rather than just trying to win campaigns and stuff. I like the idea there of the politician in political campaigns that represent the most people, that have the most sway in our discourse, that capture kind of the public will the most, are the ones that are going to get more of those vouchers. And so, this political campaign, this political group, this politician, maybe they're not getting enough to really get their campaign off the ground, but that's a reflection of the fact that they're not reaching enough people to authentically, what's the word I'm looking for? Not the opposite of synthetically, not artificially, but naturally, authentically resonating with the interest of the population as a whole. So I like that idea. And then the third leg of that would be that our, well, actually, there's four legs. The third leg is ranked choice voting. That way, more interests are represented in the political spectrum. That way, we don't have a two-party dynamic where, so you might get a situation where you have multiple different parties, but the parties kind of coalesce into two different factions, two different groups, kind of work together. What I don't like is that the two-party duopoly that we have now kind of forces it in that way. I would like for it to be a natural consequence of the way that people vote and the way their interests are expressed through the political parties, rather than you have two political parties that have such a monopoly that they kind of artificially kind of steer the way that the public thinks about politics and what the public thinks is possible. So you have more, libertarians can get a little bit more representation. Your Green Party left-wing voters get a little bit more representation. Maybe there's a party that's a little bit more moderate, more centrist in the middle, and so I think that lessens the polarization. I think it leads to better candidates because the candidates who are going to rise up on the top are candidates who have more of a broad appeal rather than appeal to 51% of the population, but the other 49% really hate this politician, right? Someone who is more appealing to a more broader scope of the electorate. And then the fourth leg would be that our public debates need to be, right now, I don't think most people know this, our debate system in the U.S., where we have like the presidential debates on Fox News or CNN, it's, I don't know if syndicated is the right word, but it shifts around to the different networks. There's like a deal where basically one network will get to put on the first one, but then the other network will get to put on the second debate, and so on and so forth. That part's fine, right? But the issue is that currently it's all privately run. It's a basically like a business deal between the mainstream network outlets and the two main political parties. And so they're incentivized, the two main political parties are incentivized to keep the smaller parties out of it. So you never see a libertarian candidate on the debate stage. You never see a Green Party candidate on the debate stage. What I would like to see is that the debates are run publicly, or not necessarily run publicly, but at least that there's regulations by the government saying, you need to make it open to, whatever the qualifications are to get represented on the national stage. Maybe that's something like, your candidate had to receive a certain threshold of votes within the primary, so that way we're not having a billion different people on the stage, but we're still getting there's a significant amount of people in the country who have supported this candidate. We want to have their opinions represented on the debate stage. And it could even be something like, the first debate is a little bit like, I guess that is the way it's run right now, is like there's a lower threshold for the first debate. And then as you move up to like the second debate and then the final debate, like you're eliminating like maybe it gets down to the most popular two candidates, or maybe the most popular three candidates in that election by the final debate. But I would like to see more representation, at least at those lower level debates. And I think it would be useful. I haven't really put too much thought into this, but things are moving more away from mainstream media and network cable television, more to online platforms. So maybe this pulls it out of the hands of just like CNN and Fox News, and maybe we get something more like, I don't know, like I don't even know what would be appropriate, because so many of the media personalities online are hyper partisan. But if there was something like maybe like Jubilee, for example, right? Jubilee, I wouldn't say they're hyper partisan per se, so maybe it'd be appropriate for someone like Jubilee to host one of the debates. I don't know, something like that. It'd be interesting.
Profit social media platforms, these predatory algorithms,
Sure.
They elevate the most extreme voices on all sides to provoke our outrage.
Right.
Because that gets more clicks.
Yes.
And that makes them more money. It's a rage economy. These platforms designed by those billionaires, these platforms appeal to our worst demons instead of our better angels.
Mm-hmm.
These billionaires are engineering our emotions so they can profit off of our pain. They are selling us conflict and calling it community. These platforms don't incentivize us doing what we're doing here, which is listening to each other and finding.
Oh man, that's a killer line, and it's so true. They are advertising kind of like community. That's what social media is supposed to be. But 100%, it's conflict. It's all about the algorithm pushing conflict because it gets clicks and attention. I love that. That's such a good line.
Platforms want us at each other's throats because those billionaires benefit. Whether you're in the top 3% or whether you're in the bottom 3%, we have a lot more in common with each other than we do with those billionaires.
Absolutely.
And so they want us focused on how we're different. There's definitely a progressive conversation, a conservative conversation. That's been happening since the beginning of time. It's healthy, it's good. I'm worried about how these platforms, they divide us further apart so that we can't find that common ground anymore, and it's corrosive to our politics.
Well, if you're elected senator,
Yeah.
what are you going to try and implement and pass in order to make sure that this divide is eliminated?
Yeah.
Because this divide is kind of tearing
It
all
is.
of us apart.
It is. One, I want to be very honest with you. one candidate, one senator is not going to fix this.
Oh, absolutely.
This is going to be fixed by you and the people around the circle. Hopefully, running and supporting candidates who align with this purpose. But to answer your question directly about what I would want to do if I got in there, I've served for 4 terms in the state house. I've been fighting these billionaires in the trenches of the Texas legislature, and I've been bringing together Democrats and Republicans to do that. I had a bill that I filed a few sessions ago. It was actually a Bernie Sanders idea to bring cheap prescription drugs from Canada to Texas, because
Right.
Canadians pay half of what we pay
Very
because
little.
Big Pharma controls our healthcare system. And I didn't think it was going to pass. But a friend of mine in the Freedom Caucus, a far-right Republican from Wichita Falls, he called me up and he was like, I really like your bill because I believe in free markets and Big Pharma distorts the free market. So he and I got that bill passed through the Texas House,
Okay.
through the Texas Senate, and we got it signed by the governor. It is now law in the state of Texas. We're going to start importing those drugs and saving lives. So that's an example of bringing people together across a progressive and a conservative spectrum to take power away from Big Pharma and help all Texans, regardless of your political party, regardless of your race, regardless of your gender, regardless of your religion. That's what I'm going to try to do as a U.S. Senator. I want to focus on prescription drugs. I want to focus on housing. I want to focus on childcare, all things I've worked on here. I'll just tell you, we're not going to make progress on any of those issues until we get the corruption out of our politics.
Absolutely.
And so the first bill I want to file, the first bill I hopefully can vote on, is comprehensive political reform to limit big money, to end things like gerrymandering, so that we can have a government that's responsive to us and not billionaires.
But when you say comprehensive government reform,
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah, banning super PACs. This is the biggest loophole in our campaign finance system.
Sure.
I also think we have to lower campaign finance contribution limits. We do have limits at the federal level. We don't have them here in Texas.
Right.
I filed a bill to put them in place here in Texas. But even those limits at the federal level, they're way too high, and they are porous. There are so many loopholes, so many ways to get around them. We've got to tighten up the system so we can actually have a political system that responds to people and not billionaires. And then I want to go further on ethics and transparency. I don't think lawmakers in our nation's capital should be buying and selling stocks, especially engaging in the insider trading, which we've seen in both political parties.
Yes.
We got to end that. We got to put an outright ban on that. These are just some of my ideas, but I'm very open to others.
All right, pause.
Oh,
Sorry.
man. Sorry.
I apologize.
Oh,
Des,
couple ones.
you have to
I
come
have been
back.
voted out. Please return to your seat.
Hey, Malik.
So I do agree with a lot of things that you said earlier. As a man of faith, I feel like your heart is in the right place as well with a lot of things. I would say my only issue is we kind of talked about how using the billionaires' money that they're using, basically how they're avoiding taxes, avoiding paying money for all these things, and how people could potentially use that exact same money to start a business. My only issue with that is how many people nowadays are getting educated on how to start a business.
Yep.
And that's a very huge issue. So we can also say money is a problem, but I don't think that's necessarily what it is. And also, and I would love to be very wrong about this because I am very passionate about teachers being very underpaid.
Yeah.
And you are a teacher, so I have a lot of respect just
Sure.
there in itself. But I think you would agree as well that you even taking the step to leave that job and to now run for Senate, that's also taking a risk. Yeah. And there's people that are business owners that are obviously making a lot of money, and either way, they're going to find a way how to avoid those taxes regardless. So, but wouldn't you agree that you leaving that safe, secure job to run for Senate, that's taking a risk? Therefore, if you were now successful, you kind of deserve extra compensation for that. Would you agree?
Oh, I'm all for success.
Okay.
I'm not trying to demonize success.
Right.
Guess what percentage of baby boomers made more money than their parents? Just take a wild guess.
A wild guess. Ooh, I don't have a wild guess.
It was 90%.
Okay.
90% of baby boomers made more money than their parents did. They lived the American dream. It was a reality for most people in that generation. Guess what that number is for millennials like me?
No idea.
It's 23.
50%. It's even lower for Gen Z.
Not too bad, actually.
The American dream is out of reach increasingly for most people, particularly most young people in this state and across the country.
Right.
And that is not because millennials or Gen Z are more lazy or are not interested in succeeding or interested in growing and thriving.
Right.
It's because the system is rigged against us. That system over the last 50 years with trickle-down economics has just been so heavily weighted toward the people at the top, the billionaires, the mega donors. and then they use that wealth and rig more rules for themselves. I'll give you one example.
Okay.
In the 1980s, they deregulated the banking system, and it allowed for these big banks to charge working people, the working poor, overdraft fees. So now you can charge a single mom who's just trying to get by, working multiple jobs, you can charge her multiple overdraft fees a day, and they profit overwhelmingly from those fees.
Right.
So that's an example of a rule, or I guess a lack of a rule, that allows for the wealthy to profit off of working people and the working poor.
Right.
These are rules we can change. They're man-made. We had better rules before trickle-down economics.
I mean, I'll take a little issue with this. The wealthy profiting off of the middle class or whatever, like, yeah, of course. I mean, all profit is going to come from business transactions or buying goods and services. Yeah, they're going to profit off of us. That's not really the issue. I get what he's trying to say, though. It's like profiting unfairly. The thing is, like, they should be able to profit off of the middle class. I know that might sound weird to people, but like when you run a business, you run it to make a profit. You kind of have to make a profit. And if the middle class is doing the majority of the consumer spending, then yeah, I mean, the profit is going to come from that spending. The key, though, is it needs to be a mutually beneficial relationship. They're profiting off of us, but we need to be paid a fair wage. We need to be able to, have decent lives, be able to, spend money to have a decent, comfortable life and have some time off to spend with our family and things of that nature. Be healthy, have health insurance.
We can get back to that, but it's going to take you and me and all of us coming together across these divisions to take that power back, because they're not going to give it up.
100%.
They have more money, we have more people.
Yes.
We have the majority.
I say my only thing with that is because I agree with a lot of things that you're saying. My only thing is we're talking a lot about money, but money's not throwing, regardless of if people are getting paid more, that's not going to solve the issue.
Yeah.
The thing is kind of like we were saying earlier, people that are making a lot of money maybe not teaching other people how to basically have that exact same success.
Yes.
So maybe it's not a financial issue. It's like maybe you have a lack of education on how to start that business, how to stop being a teacher. Now you're running for Senate. How many people know how to do that are teachers right now?
Yeah, I think it's both, right?
Right, exactly, for sure.
And I authored a bill in the state legislature to provide financial literacy education for students in Texas. Because, in addition to learning the quadratic equation or reading Shakespeare, you should also learn how the economy works and learn how to manage your money. These are skills that maybe will have more of an impact on your life than whether or not you read Shakespeare. And I think our education system has to take that into account. The problem is here in Texas and across the country, we have billionaires like Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilkes who are trying to close our public schools. We've seen public schools closing at an alarming rate all over Texas in all kinds of communities, including in my own district. Schools are closing because they're being actively defunded by those billionaires who don't believe in giving all of us an opportunity to succeed. So all I'm trying to say is that we've got to recognize that problem, and we've got to take steps as a country, working people of all stripes, of all beliefs, to take power back from those billionaires and bring it into our communities for the things that you and I are talking about.
All right, guys, that's time. You may return to
Great
your
job, Malik.
seat.
Yeah. I think they said that I'm the first ever candidate to do the show.
Yep.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah. Maybe we'll make it to where everybody's got to come here and do this.
Yeah, I hope we start a trend.
Yeah. I'd like to invite Krista back up to introduce her claim. Hi, good to see you again.
My claim is no matter how much gun violence happens within the state of Texas, there will never be a gun ban or gun reform.
Well, that claim is pretty gut-wrenching, given that we've had 5 of the deadliest mass shootings in American history right here in Texas. One still haunts me to this day as a former public school teacher, and that's the massacre in Uvalde, Texas, in Robb Elementary, when we lost 19 babies and 2 teachers. Here's where I'll disagree with you on this claim, though. I saw those parents from Uvalde. I saw them make the 160-mile drive from Uvalde to the state capitol multiple times during that legislative session, demanding, begging for basic common sense gun safety. They believed in the Second Amendment, just like I do, but they knew that there needed to be some kind of regulation to keep everyone safe and protect everybody's freedoms, including the freedom of those 19 babies to live and fulfill their potential. What I saw them do just over the course of one legislative session is move the needle on a common sense bill to raise the age to buy those kind of weapons from 18 to 21. The murderer in Uvalde turned 18 the day before he committed that horrific massacre. Right. There was no Republican support for that bill. They had all the Democratic support. But they worked relentlessly. They met with Republican lawmakers, and they actually got 2 Republicans to switch their votes on the committee and get it passed out of committee. That's the first step in getting something to the floor. It didn't ultimately pass, hasn't passed yet, but there was progress toward a real solution that could save lives in the future. 2 of those Republicans decided to change their votes because of those conversations with the families in Uvalde. One of them sacrificed his seat in the next Republican primary to do the right thing by those kids and by those families. That kind of stuff, it makes me believe in humanity again, which can be really hard when you turn on the news or open up your social media timeline. But I do think that we can get common sense gun safety regulations in Texas, still honor the Second Amendment, and hopefully prevent those kind of massacres from happening in the future.
So my question is, what are you doing? I'm following your campaign, and I'm not really seeing anything on what you're doing to prevent gun violence in the future. I'm not saying ban guns or anything along those lines.
Sure.
Of course, I want reform. I want the legal age to be raised from 18 to 21. I myself have a 9.
Yeah.
So I think I want to hear what you're doing.
Yeah.
Tell me.
I appreciate that, because when I'm at these events all over the state, this is a question I get asked often, and I'm talking about gun safety a lot because it's on people's minds. And again, just like I've said many times in this debate, you shouldn't really take what I'm saying in this conversation. You should take a look at what I've done. I have a 100% pro-gun safety voting record in the state legislature. And if I'm elected as U.S. Senator, I'm going to fight for things like universal background checks. I'm going to fight for red flag laws. I'm going to fight to close the gun show loophole. The vast majority of Texans and Americans want these common sense gun safety rules put in place so they can save people's lives.
Why haven't you already started doing that? Why is
Well,
it?
I have.
Okay.
I've introduced a lot of gun safety bills myself. I have voted for every gun safety piece of legislation that came before me. Unfortunately, there weren't enough gun safety advocates serving in the legislature.
I find it challenging to believe that there will be any change. It's only a matter of time before there's another Uvalde shooting within Texas, and it's a matter of, I don't want to ban guns at all. I don't want to take away people's rights, but it's a matter.
Then don't do anything, just bitch and complain on fucking social media and cry about it, and then just don't fucking do anything. I know that he has to, try to convince these voters to be like motivating everything, and props to him for taking on that role, but people like this just annoy the fuck out of me. Just, okay, then don't fucking do anything. I feel like nothing can get done. I feel like, you haven't done enough and you're not doing everything. Okay, then fucking stay home and just bitch and complain all fucking day.
Matter of when are we gonna start putting these processes in place? Again, back.
When are we gonna start putting those processes in place? Maybe when you sit at home and you don't fucking do anything because you don't think anything can be done. Maybe that's when. Maybe we'll put the processes in place when you decide that you're not gonna engage with the system at all and you're just gonna fucking give up. Does that make any sense to anybody? It doesn't make any fucking sense to me. But I don't know. What the fuck do I know? I don't know.
Checks again, raising the age limit. Your mind isn't even fully developed at 18.
So I would say the biggest obstacle that's preventing us from making progress and saving lives is the influence of big money on this issue. The NRA has a stranglehold on too many politicians at the federal level, but also at the state and local level. And they use that big money to prevent all of us from passing things that most Texans want, that most Americans want. The reason we can't is because the NRA has bought too many politicians. It's why I am not taking a dime of corporate PAC money in this campaign. It's why I'm not taking money from the NRA. It's why I'm not taking money from AIPAC. I think the number of PACs that control politicians in this country is appalling. And it's why we can't seem to move forward on these issues where most of us agree.
Okay, that's interesting. I appreciate that perspective. I'm not sure that, yes, of course, the NRA does play a big role with politicians and things like that, but I think it goes back to, again, ideology. I value my home.
Yeah.
I value, my life.
Yeah.
That's why I carry a gun with me.
Sure.
I live in South Dallas, and
Yeah.
I can't go on a walk like every day by myself. So of course I'm gonna take my 9 with me just in case. And I don't think it ties back to NRA. I think it ties back to ideology.
But here's where I'll disagree, though. It can't be about ideology when everybody in the state agrees on these common sense policies. I mean, maybe there's, a handful of folks on the extremes who don't. But when you look at the data, the vast majority of Texans want these policies in place. So to me, then I ask the question, why can't we get it done? If most people are in agreement on the policy, then what's preventing us from making progress? The only answer I can come back to is the influence of big money like the NRA in our political system, the way they can buy politicians, and the way those politicians are then beholden to those groups, so they're less responsive to our needs and more responsive to their billionaire mega donors.
All right, guys, that's time. Please return to your
Great job,
seats.
yeah, good job. Yeah, thank you.
When I sat down with James, didn't agree with everything, but it was a good, healthy reminder of this isn't a bad guy. This guy genuinely wants what's good, and he thinks this is the best way to go about it. And I love Surrounded, the episodes that accentuate that and remind us of that.
I mean, politicians are good at saying what you want to hear, but there were some things that I like that he's done.
Voter education needs to happen a lot more, and it needs to be less a form of, I don't know how to say this nicely, indoctrination through media and social media. I think it needs to be more a presenting of the facts.
Do you think you're absolutely not going to vote?
100%. And it's nothing against James. It's really not. It's just two things. One, I don't see a vision that changes the system fundamentally. And two, I don't see that much of a difference. I really don't. I'm more interested in what I do to control my own life than what the government does. And so I think if I'm going to be civilly engaged, I'm going to do it in other ways other than voting. I'm wasting my time. It's 1 hour to go vote against a bunch of sheep zombies who are controlled by advertisements, and not even good advertisements, really shitty, non-nuanced arguments.
Being honest, I definitely do see myself voting. In a lot of honesty, hearing James talk, there was a lot of things that he said that I thought was great. I think on a fundamental level, we agree on a lot of things, but I think there was a lot of political talk in terms of things that he was saying and the kind of dancing around conversations rather than just talking about the root cause of, hey, this is something that I am going to push forward. I do understand that he is one person and he is not an entire body. It has swayed me in terms of who I'm going to be voting for and specific things that I'm going to be looking for as far as in politicians. When I ask them the question, okay, what is it that you're going to be able to do for me? And if they can't answer that question and they just dance around it, then it is going to sway as far as my decision.
Well, okay then. How about that? All right, I'm gonna rename this stream because it's just been nothing but reacting to Talarico here, which is not bad or anything. And then I'm gonna restart the stream. I'm actually gonna play the game, and we'll watch the Veritasium video. So, all right, I'm gonna cut it there for now. Good debate. You guys already know how I feel about it. Pretty cool guy. I like him.